Chapter 1806. The agreement. He Wushang's words caused an uproar in the square. There was no doubt that He Wushang's words were very bold. Although a heavenly immortal could use his own celestial core power to forcefully raise an earthly immortal's cultivation level, the price was very high. Ordinary heavenly immortals would not do so. However, He Wushang had actually offered such a generous condition in order to find out who had killed He Yu. It was obvious how important He Yu was to him. In the square, the 99 Chaos War gods looked at each other with hesitation. In fact, many of them knew who had killed He Yu. After all, Yun had used He Yu's natal immortal artifact, the immortal slaughtering sword, when he fought with Yuan Hongwen. He Yu was dead and the immortal slaughtering sword was in Zhuowen's hands. There was no doubt that the murderer was Yun. Suddenly, a figure rushed out from the 99 Chaos War gods. His target was the futon where He Wushang and Wei Wuyin were. Senior He, the one who killed He Yu, is Zhuowen. The origin of the god-slaying sword and the King Blade Saint Talisman were all taken away by him. Senior He, you only need to search his spiritual ring and you will know the answer. The moment the person rushed out, his voice was loud and clear. Wei Rue. Yuan Hongwen frowned slightly and looked at Wei Rue, who rushed out with some displeasure. Despicable. Ji Chenyan's beautiful eyes narrowed as she said in a low voice with contempt. Wei Rue was extremely smart. The moment he mentioned the murderer, he rushed towards He Wushang and Wei Wuyin to prevent Zhuowen from taking revenge on him. Once he rushed to the side of Wei Wuyin and He Wushang, the two heavenly immortal elders, Yuan would not be able to deal with him even if he had hundreds of times the courage. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with coldness as he stared coldly at Wei Rue, who was rushing towards He Wushang and Wei Wuyin. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Zhuowen had always adhered to the principle of peace as long as others did not provoke him. If someone took the initiative to provoke him, Zhuowen would not let them off. Wei Rue's despicable attitude caused Zhuowen's heart to be filled with killing intent. Zhuowen stood up abruptly and took a step forward with his right foot. Invisible ripples spread out as he disappeared from where he stood and reappeared above Wei Rue. At this moment, Wei Rue was still several thousand meters away from He Wushang and Wei Wuyin. To him, this distance didn't even require half a breath's time. Unfortunately, Zhuowen was like a mountain, suddenly blocking in front of him. You. Wei Rue's pupils constricted as he abruptly stopped in his tracks. His gaze was fixated on Zhuowen as he revealed an expression of disbelief. Die. Zhuowen clenched his right fist, and the power of the holy physique of the small perfection surged out. At the same time, 9 golden runes lingered around his right fist and arm. They kept rotating, making the power of his right fist even more terrifying. Wei Rue's eyes were filled with fear when he felt the fierceness of the punch. He knew very well how terrifying Zhuowen was. Thus, he let out a shrill cry, and the eagle on his shoulder immediately grew in size. The eagle expanded to a height of several dozen meters, then landed at Wei Rue's feet. It lifted him up, spread its wings, and fled as fast as lightning. Senior He, great ancestor, save me. The moment he retreated, Wei Rue immediately asked He Wushang and Wei Wuyin for help. He didn't even dare to fight with Zhuowen. Wei Rue's fearful performance puzzled many warriors in the square. Most of them had been eliminated in advance and hadn't been able to enter the path of life and death, so they hadn't seen the earth-shattering battle between Zhuowen and Yuan Hongwen. If they had seen that battle, they would have been even more miserable than Wei Rue. Little bastard, how dare you? Wei Wuyin shouted angrily. He took a step forward and went straight for Zhuowen. He was a little anxious. After all, Wei Rue was the most outstanding descendant of their beast envoy clan. He couldn't die like this. The one who attacked with Wei Wuyin was He Wushang. At this moment, He Wushang's face was extremely gloomy, and the murderous intent in his eyes spread throughout his body like a vast ocean. Unfortunately, as soon as Wei Wuyin and He Wushang attacked, 2 figures suddenly tore through the air and descended from the sky, blocking Wei Wuyin and He Wushang. Wei Wuyin's expression changed slightly. He suddenly blasted out with his right hand, and then a surge of demon chi surged. He grunted and retreated continuously. Only then did he see clearly that it was a demon blade with monstrous demon chi that blocked his path. He Wushang was in a similar state as Wei Wuing. He also retreated dozens of steps. What blocked He Wushang was a Buddhist commandment blade that radiated Buddhist light. This is a battle between the younger generation. How dare the two elders interfere? An indifferent voice rang out the moment He Wushang and Wei Wuing were blocked. Afterward, Shiji, who was sitting on a cushion nearby, stared coldly at He Wushang and Wei Wuing. He Wushang and Wei Wuing shivered when they saw the cold light in Shiji's eyes. A trace of fear rose in their hearts. Shiji was a true immortal expert and the renowned fighting Buddha demon saint of the ancient times. An expert like that wasn't someone they could afford to offend. However, the two of them were extremely unwilling. After all, He had been killed by Zhuan, and Wei Rui was about to be hunted down by Zhuan. How could the two of them let this matter go? Suddenly, a miserable cry rang out. Zhuan had caught up to Wei Rui. Afterward, Zhuan threw out a punch and directly blasted the eagle to pieces. Afterward, Wei Rui was lifted up by Zhuan. Zhuan, what are you doing? Hurry up and release Wei Rui, or you know the consequences. Wei Wuing's eyes narrowed as he could not help but shout out. Zhuan turned around and glanced at Wei Wuing. He said indifferently, I have always been an upright person. This person used underhanded methods to plot against me. If I let him go because of this, would I let him plot against me again? With that, Zhuan clenched his right hand and a violent force erupted. Wei Rui felt excruciating pain all over his body. Afterward, he exploded into a bloody mist while his soul was caught by Zhuan. You? Wei Wuing's eyes widened in rage. He glared at Zhuan and roared. He formed a seal with his right hand and a terrifying beast suddenly leapt out from behind him. As soon as the beast appeared, it roared at the sky and directly blocked the demonic blade in front of it. Then, it rushed toward Zhuan. Shiji's eyes narrowed slightly. He snorted coldly and formed a seal with his right hand. Suddenly, the demonic blade expanded to several hundred feet in length and slashed across the air. The demonic blade let out a miserable cry and was directly chopped into pieces. Wei Wuing spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was extremely pale and his eyes were filled with fear. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Shiji's eyes were cold. The huge demonic blade released a terrifying demonic chi and directly slashed towards Wei Wuing. Wei Wuing's eyes were filled with madness. Just as he was about to use the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman, Do Hua appeared in front of him. Do Hua's right hand formed a claw and suddenly grasped. Surging celestial origin power surged out and turned into a huge claw that grabbed the demonic blade. Do Hua said in a low voice, Brother Shi, enough is enough. Wei Wuing sighed softly and hurriedly said to Do Hua, Divine Master, you have to uphold justice for me. Zhuan is really too arrogant. He actually dared to kill the successor of my Beast Envoy Saint Talisman clan in front of everyone. He's really audacious. Do Hua's face was gloomy. He said, You shut up as well. Wei Rui was indeed in the wrong. If he hadn't taken the lead, this wouldn't have happened. This matter ends here. As he spoke, Do Hua waved his sleeve and the demonic blade left his hand and was taken back by Shiji. On the other hand, Shiji looked indifferently at He Wushang and said, You still want to attack? He Wushang silently looked at the Buddhist commandment blade before him and clenched his fists. In the end, he returned to his futon, but the killing intent in his eyes was extremely dense. Wei Wuing silently returned to his futon as well. Wei Rui had been killed and Shiji had stood up for him, so he knew that it was utterly impossible for him to look for trouble with Zhuan now. A trace of a mocking smile appeared on the corners of Zhuan's mouth as he silently put Wei Rui's soul core away. Wei Rui's cultivation wasn't high, and he was only at the intermediate stage of the earthly immortal realm. So, even if his soul core was made into a soul core bomb, it wouldn't be of much help to Zhuan. However, Wei Rui's soul core contained a trace of the Beast Envoy Saint Talisman's quintessence, and it was extremely beneficial to him. So, he naturally wouldn't let Wei Rui's soul core go. Zhuan cupped his fists towards Shiji with gratitude in his eyes. Shiji had helped him twice, and according to the agreement, Shiji would only help him 3 times. In other words, Shiji would only help him one last time. Then, Zhuan looked towards Do Hua and said with a blazing gaze, "Divine Lord, according to the agreement, I've already obtained first place in the god battle. So, is it time for you to fulfill your promise to me?" Do Hua took a deep look at Zhuan and nodded. "Of course I'll fulfill my promise to you." At this point, Do Hua looked towards Elder Gu, who wasn't far from the central divine palace, and said with a nod, "Elder Gu, I'll leave the rest to you." Elder Gu took a step forward and arrived in front of Zhuan. "Take out your wife." Zhuan looked excited. With a flick of his finger, he took out a crystal coffin from his spirit ring. His entire body was trembling slightly. The moment the crystal coffin appeared, many cultivators in the square revealed complicated expressions. They didn't expect that Zhuan would risk his life to participate in the god battle and obtain first place, all for the sake of the woman in the crystal coffin. Ji Chenyan's beautiful eyes were even more complicated. She muttered in a low voice, "No wonder he worked so hard to obtain first place in the god battle. It was all for the woman in front of him." For this woman to have such a man who is willing to sacrifice himself for her, she should have no regrets in this life. At this point, Ji Chenyan's gaze towards Zhuan changed, and the surrounding cultivators were also moved. Chapter 1807. Returning to the divine tomb, Yuan Hongwen's gaze also landed on the crystal coffin Zhuan. He frowned slightly and shook his head with a sigh. "I never thought that Zhuan would be such a sentimental person." Elder Gu carefully studied Mu Chenxue in the crystal coffin. After a moment of thought, he said, "Since the divine master has promised you, I will naturally do my best to treat you. However, your wife's body has already collapsed, and only her soul remains. Moreover, her soul is unstable and on the verge of collapse. It's not appropriate to treat your wife right now." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He said in a deep voice, "Senior Gu, do you need anything else?" Elder Gu nodded. "This crystal coffin should be used to stabilize this woman's soul, right? If this old man were to carelessly extract the woman's soul from the crystal coffin, her soul would immediately become unstable. At that time, even this old man would be powerless to reverse the situation. You need to find a physical body that can replace this crystal coffin. Moreover, this physical body must be stable enough. I believe that you also know the method to refine a physical body. However, the most important thing this time is to refine a physical body, the 9-soul lotus root. The chaotic divine temple does not have the 9-soul lotus root. I can provide you with the other materials, but I need you to retrieve the 9-soul lotus root for me." Zhuan frowned when he heard that. He had never heard of the 9-soul lotus root before, so how was he supposed to find it? "May I ask where the 9-soul lotus root is located?" Zhuan asked in a deep voice. "Legend has it that it grows in the divine tomb of the Nether Corp's forbidden grounds. There is a lotus pond there, and the 9-soul lotus root grows in the center of the pond. However, it belongs to the master of the divine tomb, so I'm powerless to retrieve it," Elder Gu said nonchalantly. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He never thought that the 9-soul lotus root would grow in the divine tomb of the Nether Corp's forbidden grounds. Moreover, it belonged to the master of the divine tomb. With Yuowen's current strength, how was it possible for him to retrieve the 9-soul lotus root from a place like that? "Yuan, I'll bring you to the Serene Corp's extremity grounds. I happen to have something to do there, so come with me." Suddenly, Shiji slowly stood up. His eyes were like torches as he glanced indifferently at Elder Gu and Do Hua. Zhuan sank into thought when he heard that. He looked at Shiji's expression as well as Elder Gu and Do Hua's. He knew that Elder Gu's request probably had something to do with Shiji. Zhuan cupped his fists towards Shiji with gratitude in his eyes. Speaking of which, Shiji had done a lot for him, and now he was even willing to go to the Serene Corp's extremity for him. This Do is very grateful that Brother Shi is willing to make a trip to the Serene Corp's extremis. Do Hua laughed and cupped his fists towards Shiji. "We're just taking what we need." Shiji's gaze was calm as he looked at Zhuan. "Let's go to the Serene Corp's extremity grounds together. Once we're there, I'll naturally help you obtain the 9-soul lotus root." With that, Shiji nodded at Do Hua. "Brother Do, other than the 4 battlefields, Your chaotic divine temple should also have an entrance to the serene corpse extremity grounds, right? Open it for us. Do Hua smiled, of course. Next, Do Hua led Shiji and Zhuowen into the central divine palace. Before they left, Zhuowen put the crystal coffin back into his spirit ring. His eyes were filled with tenderness. After Do Hua and the others left, Elder Gu said loudly, "It will take some time before the primordial battlefield opens. Once it opens, the 99 chaotic war gods will have the same qualifications as experts above the heavenly immortal realm. They will be the first batch to enter the primordial battlefield. After that, the primordial battlefield will open again. If anyone wants to enter the primordial battlefield, they will all have the qualifications to do so. Now let's disperse." After Elder Gu finished speaking, he left the place. Then, more than 10 heavenly immortal patriarchs left the square with their disciples and returned to the accommodations arranged by the chaotic divine temple. As for those warriors who were not chosen as chaotic war gods, their eyes were filled with bitterness. Elder Gu had said that the primordial battlefield would open again in the future. However, they knew that by then, most of the good things in the primordial battlefield would have been taken by the first batch of chaotic war gods and heavenly immortal patriarchs. What good things would be left behind by then? The dark corridor seemed to be endless. Zhuowen quietly followed behind Do Hua and Shiji. His originally excited mood slowly calmed down at this moment. After walking for about half an hour, the three of them arrived at a large hall. However, Do Hua did not stay in the hall for long. Instead, he turned right and came to an extremely remote bookshelf. Do Hua quickly pointed his hands in front of the bookshelf and condensed strange runes in the air. Then he muttered something. The bookshelf suddenly opened to both sides. Then, Zhuowen discovered that behind the bookshelf was a rather strange Dharma array. This Dharma array looked simple and unadorned. This magic formation can directly enter the small world where the serene corpse extremis is located. It can also ignore the spatial barriers in the serene corpse extremis, Do Hua said with a smile. Shiji nodded and led Zhuowen into the magic formation. He said, "Brother Do, let's start the magic formation now." Do Hua nodded as he muttered to himself. Then, he formed a seal with his hands and chanted something. Instantly, the formation exploded with a blazing light. Then, it turned into a huge white pillar of light that instantly enveloped Zhuowen and Shiji. Looking at Zhuowen and Shiji who had disappeared, Do Hua's eyes flickered. He sighed softly and said, "I hope that Shiji can persuade the master of the divine tomb to open the primordial battlefield this time. Without the serene corpse extremis, the chances of success are slim." When Zhuowen opened his eyes, he saw a world of coffins. The serene corpse extremis was filled with green mountains and clear waters. The mountains were like coiling dragons, and the mountain ranges were like serpents. Immortal mist filled the air, and waterfalls flowed down. Old trees towered into the sky, and their branches were like mist. Even the arrangement of the coffins was varied. Some coffins were directly embedded in the walls, some were placed on towering trees like bird nests, and some were floating in streams. Zhuowen looked around. Seeing this familiar scene, his heart was filled with fear. His gaze passed through the coffins and finally landed on the plateau-like tomb of the divine tomb. He knew very well that it was in the tomb of the divine tomb that he was forced to flee for his life by the tomb guards of the true immortal tomb in the east. If it weren't for the first mountain god, he probably would have died. Senior Shiji, there are 4 true immortal tombs and 1 divine tomb in the tomb of the divine tomb. The 4 true immortal tombs are all true immortals. Is the one in the tomb of the divine tomb really a god? Zhuowen looked at Shiji and asked. Zhuowen had always been very confused about whether the one buried in the tomb of the divine tomb was a god. Shiji shook his head and said, "I once said that there are no true divine transformation experts in the heavenly armor continent. Even the strongest, Songjie, is a demigod who is infinitely close to the divine transformation realm. The one in the tomb of the divine tomb can only be considered a demigod. However, his injuries were so severe that he had no choice but to bury himself in the serene corpse extremis and slowly recover his injuries over the years. Speaking of which, I am actually much luckier than that old friend of mine. Speaking of this, Shurji's face was filled with sorrow and nostalgia. Obviously, Shurji knew the master of the divine tomb. Who is the master of the divine tomb? Xiaohei landed on Zhuowen's shoulder and asked in a deep voice. Shurji glanced at Xiaohei with a complicated look in his eyes. He shook his head and said, I can't tell you this. I have been to the Serene Corpse Extremis before. That old friend of mine said that I cannot reveal his identity. This time, I will take you there and he will give you the 9-soul lotus root. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed and said, Senior Shurji, why are you so sure that the master of the divine tomb will give me the 9-soul lotus root? Shurji smiled and said, You will know when you get there. With that, Shurji waved his sleeve and immediately wrapped Zhuowen in it. They turned into a long rainbow and flew towards the depths of the Serene Corpse Extremis. Shurji's domineering behavior naturally caused a commotion among many old monsters in the Serene Corpse Extremis. Powerful divine senses swept out from various treasured lands and landed on Shurji. Shurji snorted coldly. An even more powerful divine sense gushed out and turned into a large net, blocking all the divine senses that swept out. A true immortal. He is a true immortal. Many surprised divine senses communicated with each other through divine senses. Then, these divine senses slowly withdrew into their respective treasured lands and no longer tried to probe Shurji. Shurji released his powerful divine sense and the aura of a true immortal. In the sky above the Serene Corpse Extremis, he flew unimpeded and quickly flew towards the depths of the Serene Corpse Extremis. Soon, he arrived at the center of the Serene Corpse Extremis, the huge plateau. At the top of the plateau, white snow covered the plateau as if it was wearing a layer of white gauze. At the center of the plateau stood a huge and magnificent palace. In front of the palace stood a stone tablet that seemed to reach the sky. The surface of the stone tablet was engraved with dense and profound words. At the 4 corners of the plateau, there were 4 huge tombs in the 4 directions of the central palace. Although these tombs were not as magnificent as the central palace, they were much more luxurious and majestic than most of the burial grounds Zhuowen had been to along the way. 4 huge statues stood in these 4 tombs. These 4 statues faced the central palace and knelt on one knee as if they were worshipping the owner of the tomb of the god of sin. Yun was no stranger to these 4 huge statues. They were the tomb guards of the 4 true immortal tombs. This plateau was the absolute core of the Serene Corpse Extremis. It was called the Tomb of the God of Sin. The moment Shurji arrived at the plateau, the 4 tomb guards in front of the tombs of the true immortals in the 4 corners of the Tomb of the God of Sin seemed to come alive. They slowly turned their heads and stared coldly at Shurji and Jun. Chapter 1808. Lotus Pool. The 4 tomb guards were all extraordinary. They probably had the strength of a heavenly immortal at the very least. Although Zhuowen's cultivation had reached the intermediate stage of the earthly immortal realm, he still felt that the 4 tomb guards were difficult to deal with. However, compared to the first time he met the tomb guards, Zhuowen's current state was clearly much better. At the very least, he would not flee in panic like before. The eyes of the Dao soldiers guarding the tombs blazed with fiery light. However, the fiery light was extremely cold, as if it was the dead of winter. Shurji calmly glanced at the 4 tomb guards and said indifferently, An old friend has come to meet you. Is this how you treat your guest? As soon as Shurji finished speaking, an indifferent voice came from the huge palace in the center of the plateau. Shurji, you're here again. Are you here to persuade me again? Shurji's eyes flickered. He pointed at Zhuowen beside him and said with a smile, That's right. However, I've also brought this little fellow with me this time. The master of the divine tomb was silent for a moment before he said, Dongfeng, Nangong, Beichen, Shimen, the 4 of you open the restriction and welcome the guest. As soon as he finished speaking, 4 enormous bronze coffins immediately flew out from the tombs at the 4 corners of the plateau. The auras of the 4 bronze coffins were extremely terrifying. It was not difficult to imagine that the people in the 4 bronze coffins were all peerless experts. However, Zhuowen still keenly sensed that although the auras of the 4 bronze coffins were strong, they were still inferior to Shiji, who was beside him. As Shiji had been absorbed too much of his celestial core power by the Luo Yenjing over the past 10,000 years, his cultivation had fallen severely. He had fallen from the peak of the true immortal realm to the intermediate stage of the true immortal realm. The auras of the 4 true immortal coffins were not as strong as Shiji's. They should be at the early stage of the true immortal realm. However, Zhuan knew that the true immortals in the 4 true immortal tombs were not simple. Moreover, from their names, it could be seen that the masters of the 4 true immortal tombs should be adept at joint attacks. If the 4 early-stage true immortals were to display a joint attack, even Shiji would have a hard time defeating the 4 true immortals. Bang 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 bang. For muffled sounds were heard. Soon after, Yuan saw the lids of the 4 bronze coffins open one after another. 4 figures with terrifying auras emerged from the 4 coffins. In the coffin in the eastern tomb, there was actually a shifty-eyed middle-aged man. Zhuan had a deep impression of this eastern tomb. Back then, it was this person who had sent the tomb guards to force Zhuan to flee miserably. Speaking of which, Zhuan still had some old grudges with this person. Back then, the voice that came from the eastern tomb was extremely solemn. In Zhuan's impression, it should have been a solemn and dignified person. He didn't expect it to be a wretched middle-aged uncle. This shifty-eyed middle-aged man slowly turned around and grinned at Zhuan as he said, "Little fellow, we meet again. I truly never imagined that in a short period of over 10 years, your cultivation has actually improved to such an extent. It truly causes one to sigh endlessly with emotion." Zhuan's eyes flickered, but he did not answer. Instead, he focused on the other 3 people. In the northern tomb, a woman with long snow-white hair and a cold expression came out. She looked to be about 30 years old, and her body exuded a cold and mature charm. In the western tomb, there was a burly young man with dark skin and a charmingly naive appearance. There was always a smile on his face. In the southern tomb, there was a young man in a white robe with a cloth band on his head. He was dressed like a scholar, and there was an elegant smile on his face. The 4 people bowed to the tomb of the god of sin from afar. Then, they stood at the 4 corners of the plateau and made complicated seals with their hands. Afterward, Yuan found that the white snow on the plateau slowly dissipated, and there were traces of ripples on the surface of the plateau. Zhuan stared at the powerful formations around the plateau, and a look of understanding appeared in his eyes. Before the 4 of them made the seals, he had not sensed that there were formations around the plateau at all. It was clear that the formations were extremely profound, so profound that even Zhuan had failed to notice them. As expected of the tomb of the god of sin. The formations here are so terrifying, so they should be extremely powerful ancient formations, Zhuan thought. "Shiji, come in." The voice of the master of the tomb of the god of sin rang out once more after the formations were opened. Shiji led Zhuan to the tomb of the god of sin in an instant. Soon after, they arrived before the central palace and said, "Don't you want to consider the matter of the ancient battlefield? I think you also want to know the truth of what happened back then, right?" The master of the tomb of the god of sin fell silent for a moment before saying, "We'll discuss this matter after you enter the hall. You must have brought the little fellow here for another reason, right?" Shiji chuckled and said, "Of course I have another reason. This little fellow's wife has fallen into a deep slumber for various reasons, and her body has collapsed. In order to save his wife, he needs the 9-soul lotus root. I know you have it." "The 9-soul lotus root? That's a precious thing that my lord has painstakingly cultivated for thousands of years. How can you give it away just like that?" The shifty-eyed middle-aged man spoke with slight displeasure. Zhuan cupped his hands deeply towards the hall and said in a deep voice, "Master of the tomb of the god of sin, if you're able to give the 9-soul lotus root to me, I'll definitely remember it for the rest of my life. If the master of the tomb of the god of sin has any requests in the future, I'll definitely not refuse. The 9-soul lotus root is too precious. Little fellow, your appetite is really big." The woman with snow-white hair and a cold expression shook her head. Zhuan paid no attention to her. He stared fixedly at the enormous palace before him. He knew that only the master of the tomb of the god of sin had the qualifications to decide who the 9-soul lotus root belonged to. The master of the tomb of the god of sin fell silent for a long time before he finally said faintly, "Baichen, take this little fellow into the lotus pond in the palace and give him the 9-soul lotus root." Hun was stunned, and then he revealed an expression of wild joy. He hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Senior, for your selfless gift." However, after this wild joy, Hun quickly revealed a puzzled expression. He was puzzled as to why the master of the tomb of the god of sin would agree to give the 9-soul lotus root to him so easily. It wasn't difficult to discern from the conversation between the shifty-eyed middle-aged man and the snow-haired woman that the 9-soul lotus root was extremely precious. Moreover, the master of the tomb of the god of sin wasn't related to him at all, so why did he agree so readily? The corners of Shurji's mouth held a smile, and he wasn't surprised by the master's answer at all. He said to Zhuan in a low voice, "I'll go in and discuss the matter of establishing the ancient battlefield with the master of the tomb of the god of sin. You go get the 9-soul lotus root from the lotus pond with Miss Baichen." As soon as he finished speaking, Shurji didn't wait for Zhuan to speak before he took a step forward, and he was like an ethereal shadow that suddenly vanished behind the door. "Zhuan, let me introduce myself first. I'm Baichen Ruoli, and I'm the guardian of the north for my lord." The icy-cold woman with snow-white hair arrived before Zhuan and spoke indifferently. "Hee kid, I'm Dongfang Qinsheng. You should remember me, right?" The shifty-eyed middle-aged man hurriedly moved over to Zhuan's side and patted Zhuan's shoulder as if they were close friends. Moreover, before Zhuan could reply, this person pointed at the refined scholar not too far away and said, "That's Nangong Haoren. He's a pedantic scholar who usually likes to show off. The other person is Shimin Fei. Don't be fooled by his simple and honest appearance. He's even more terrifying than any ferocious beast when he's infuriated. Kids, stay away from him." Zhuan looked helplessly at Dongfang Qinsheng's overly familiar appearance. He wanted to interrupt, but every time he was interrupted, it made him feel rather awkward. "Dongfang Qinsheng, this has nothing to do with you. Go away." Baichen Ruoli's eyes were as cold as ice as she stared at Dongfang Qinsheng. Dongfang Qinsheng, who had been speaking with fervor and assurance, suddenly shuddered. He turned to Baichen Ruoli with a fawning smile and said, "Baichen, don't you see that I'm excited? No one has come here for many years, and I'm about to die of loneliness. If I don't talk to this little brother, I'll be bored to death." Then you'll be bored to death. "Don't cause trouble for Baichen Ruoli," Nangong Haoren said with a carefree smile. Shimin Fei revealed a simple and honest smile and looked over quietly. He didn't say anything. Dongfang Qinsheng scratched his head and was about to refute Nangong Haoren when Baichen Ruoli said coldly, "Dongfang Qinsheng, if you don't leave, then don't blame me for being rude." As she spoke, Baichen Ruoli's long hair fluttered despite the lack of wind. A terrifying chill faintly swept out from her body, and the surrounding air seemed to freeze under the influence of this chill. Dongfang Qinsheng's expression changed drastically. He immediately stepped aside and muttered, "Are you serious? Can I be scared of you?" Baichen Ruoli glanced at Dongfang Qinsheng, then said to Zhuan, "Come with me. I'll take you to the lotus pond to get the 9-soul lotus root you want." After saying that, Baichen Ruoli turned around and entered the main hall. Zhuan, who was deep in thought, followed closely behind her. After the two of them left, Dongfang Qinsheng, who had been smiling mischievously, turned serious. He said, "Isn't Her Excellency being too nice to this child? Her Excellency has cultivated the 9-soul lotus root for thousands of years. It wasn't easy for her to hasten its maturity. Originally, it was for her own use, but now she's giving it to Zhuan." Nangong Haoren nodded solemnly. Her Excellency has recognized this child as the child of destiny. Moreover, the Fushi cauldron is indeed in his possession. As long as it doesn't cross Her Excellency's bottom line, Her Excellency will satisfy this child's request. Dongfang Qinsheng remained silent, but in the end he sighed softly. The palace was extremely large. Baichen Ruoli led Zhuan for a full hour before they walked out of the outermost corridor. After passing through several other halls, they finally arrived at a large hall on the left side of the palace. This large hall was made entirely of jade, and a dense immortal qi assaulted their nostrils. Zhuowen revealed an intoxicated expression. In the middle of the hall, there was a large lotus pond. The lotus pond occupied a third of the hall's surface area, and at the edge of the pond stood a jade-colored fence made of jade. Chapter 1809. 9 colored python lotus leaves and lotuses grew in the lotus pond. Moreover, these lotuses weren't ordinary. They gave off a different kind of charm amidst the dense immortal qi. They were immortal lotuses, not just immortal lotuses. Surrounded by countless lotuses, a unique lotus flower quietly bloomed at the center of the lotus pond. It stood out like a crane among chickens. This lotus flower had a total of 9 petals. Each petal had 9 different colors and 9 different auras quietly flowed out from it. Moreover, Yuan discovered that each of the 9 petals of this lotus flower had a palm-sized illusory figure of a young girl. There were a total of 9 illusory figures of young girls. The 9 illusory figures of young girls were all extremely charming and had extraordinary charm. Anyone who looked at them would involuntarily be infatuated with them. This is the 9-soul lotus. Below the roots of this 9-soul lotus is the 9-soul lotus root. Lord has instructed that since you want the 9-soul lotus root, you should enter the lotus pond and obtain it yourself. Beichen Ruoli glanced at Zhuowen with a complicated expression. Soon after, she left the hall and disappeared from Zhuowen's sight in the blink of an eye. Zhuowen had a thoughtful look in his eyes. He had naturally sensed the complicated expression that Beichen Ruoli had revealed after she left. Although he was rather puzzled as to why she had revealed such a complicated expression, he knew that it should be related to this lotus pond. The immortal qi contained in this lotus pond is not inferior to the immortal qi in the celestial pool in the primal chaos divine temple. In fact, in a certain sense, it is much denser than the celestial pool. Since the master of the divine tomb has allowed you to enter the lotus pond to obtain the immortal qi, it is likely that he is also allowing you to absorb the immortal qi from the lotus pond. Xiao He appeared. He stared at the lotus pond before him and continued, "It is also possible that there is some unknown danger in the lotus pond. If you want to obtain the 9-soul lotus root, you must rely on yourself to overcome this danger." Zhuowen nodded. Xiao He's guess was reasonable. Regardless of whether there was danger in the lotus pond or not, he had to retrieve the 9-soul lotus root. Moreover, the master of the divine tomb was so powerful. If he really wanted to harm him, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble. Thinking of this, Yuan leaped into the lotus pond. However, the moment he jumped into the lotus pond, the surrounding lotuses suddenly trembled. Then, the petals around these lotuses slowly fell off. Like hidden weapons, they suddenly flew out and swept toward Zhuowen's vital points. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. His right foot stepped repeatedly in the void, quickly dodging the flying petals. After dodging the first wave of petals, Zhuowen's pupils abruptly constricted. This was because he discovered that there were actually an even more terrifying number of petals that swept over. These petals were densely packed and enveloped the entire space of the lotus pond. There was simply no space to dodge. Zhuowen's expression became extremely solemn. He snorted coldly as a strange and invisible ripple of energy spread out from beneath his feet. Then, his figure was like a ghost as he actually directly disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he had actually already appeared at the other end of the lotus pond. However, these petals seemed to have developed intelligence as they actually changed directions and flew toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen's gaze was ghastly cold. Ripples spread out from beneath his feet once again. His speed was even faster than before, and his entire figure was even more erratic. Swoosh, swoosh. After dodging several times, Zhuowen successfully dodged the countless petals and landed in the air above the 9-soul lotus at the center of the lotus pond. That's Dao insight, right? This kid actually comprehended Dao insight. It's truly rare and commendable. Within the palace, an image floated in the air above Beichen Ruoli, Dongfang Qinxing, Nangong Haoren, and Shimin Fei, and this image was the scene of the palace where the lotus pond was located. Earlier, Zhuan had urged his Dao insight to the extreme, so it naturally fell into the eyes of the four of them. Dongfang Qinxing, who acted as if he was familiar with them, was the first to cry out in surprise. It wasn't just Dongfang Qinxing. The other three also opened their mouths slightly as they stared fixedly at the scene within the lotus pond. The four of them were all old existences that had lived since the ancient times until now, so they were naturally not unfamiliar with Dao insight. Even in the ancient times, there weren't many people that were able to comprehend Dao insight. Most of them were monstrous and extraordinary figures. However, these monstrous figures that had comprehended Dao insight all chose to step into the door of profundity in the end and never came out again. Only a very small number of them were able to resist the temptation of the door of profundity. However, most of these cultivators had only touched upon the level of Dao insight. They might be able to display the power of Dao insight occasionally, but they were still very far away from completely mastering it. However, Zhuan was different. From the scene of him smoothly dodging the attack of countless petals, it could be seen that the power of Dao insight was used by Zhuan as if it was an extension of his arm. It was extremely smooth. There was no doubt that Zhuan had definitely comprehended Dao insight. To be able to comprehend Dao insight, it's no wonder that the Lord values him so much. Even if this kid isn't the child of destiny, just the ability to comprehend Dao insight alone is probably enough for the Lord to value him, right? Baichen Ruoli said in a deep voice. The other three nodded. They had the same thoughts as Baichen Ruoli. After witnessing Zhuowen's ability, their views of Zhuowen had changed. Landing on top of the nine-soul lotus, Zhuowen's eyes became extremely hot. Then, he reached out with his right hand and grabbed the nine-soul lotus. Then he pulled hard. Instantly, the nine-soul lotus and its roots were pulled out. However, at the instant he pulled out the nine-soul lotus, a black figure suddenly flashed toward Zhuowen's neck like lightning. A strong sense of danger rose in Zhuowen's mind. Then, without hesitation, he formed a seal with his right hand and used the lone peak of the celestial technique to block in front of him. Bang, bang, bang. The moment the lone peak appeared in front of him, a series of explosive sounds immediately rang out. Then, Zhuan felt an extremely terrifying force coming from the lone peak, forcing him to retreat. Zhuowen's eyes turned cold. He grabbed the nine-soul lotus with his right hand and pulled hard again. This time, he used the power of the Perfection Saint body and finally pulled the nine-soul lotus out of the ground. At the bottom of the nine-soul lotus, there was indeed a large lotus root. The lotus root was divided into 9 segments, and each segment had a different color. It was surprisingly the same color as the 9 petals of the nine-soul lotus. This should be Zhuowen's goal this time, the nine-soul lotus root. After taking out the 9-soul lotus and lotus root, Zhuan immediately put them into his spirit ring. Then he grabbed the lone peak and retreated, wanting to use this opportunity to leave the lotus pond. Unfortunately, the black shadow suddenly roared, and its voice was filled with anger. As soon as the roar came out, Zhuowen's expression changed drastically. This was because he realized that the lotuses around him had gone berserk. The petals were like the sharpest hidden weapons in the world. They swept over and enveloped Zhuowen's vital points. Block it. Zhuowen did not hesitate to split out his mind strength doppelganger. The mind strength doppelganger was wearing a wide black robe. Its eyes were cold. As soon as it appeared, its right hand pointed at the void. Runes swept out from its hand and formed a tortoise-shell-like protective shield around it. Bang, bang, bang. Countless petals swept over and bombarded the tortoise-shell-like protective shield set up by the devouring curse restriction. Countless sparks erupted, but it barely blocked the attack. Boom. As for the lonely peak not far away, it had reached the point of exhaustion at this moment. It actually collapsed inch by inch, and then a black shadow rushed toward Zhuowen Zun at an extremely fast speed. Only then did Zhuowen see the true face of the black shadow. The black shadow's body was a python that constantly flashed with 9 colors. Even the python's tongue was in 9 colors. After seeing the 9-colored python, Zhuowen's expression became extremely solemn. This 9-colored python was not simple. It gave him a sense of crisis, so he did not dare to be careless. Slaughtering underworld finger. Zhuan bent his right hand and pointed his finger. Then, countless underworld water droplets gushed out from his body. Then, Zhuan opened the transmission formation that led to the Luo Yenjing and collected all the underworld water droplets of the Qintian tribe. The number of underworld water droplets has exceeded 1 million? When all the underworld water droplets of the Qintian tribe gathered around Zhuan, Zhuan's eyes were as bright as the moon. Then he pointed his finger. Suddenly, 1 million underworld water droplets turned into a terrifying underworld stream and swept toward the 9-colored python. Bang, bang, bang. The two collided in an instant. Then the underworld stream collapsed. However, the moment the underworld stream collapsed, it began to rotate and turned into a circle of reincarnation. Then, it suddenly wrapped around the 9-colored python's neck. Obviously, the 9-colored python did not expect such a sudden change in the underworld stream. It wailed and twisted its body, but it could not break free from the circle of reincarnation. After all, when the number of underworld water droplets reached 1 million, the true power of the slaughtering underworld finger was revealed. Celestial art of asking Buddha. At the moment when the 9-colored python was trapped, Zhuan used the celestial art of asking Buddha again. His whole body shone with Buddhist light, and a huge shadow of an ancient Buddha condensed in the void behind him. The ancient Buddha shadow stretched out its huge right hand and grabbed the 9-colored python. Then, it threw it out of the lotus pond. Bang! The 9-colored python blasted a huge hole in the wall in front of the hall. In the hole, the 9-colored python roared angrily, but it was still alive and kicking. Zhuan looked surprised, but he didn't stop his attacks. The ancient Buddha's phantom repeatedly used terrifying Buddhist superpowers, which landed on the 9-colored python's body. Even though the 9-colored python's skin was thick and tough, it was inevitable for it to show signs of fatigue after receiving so many attacks while being beaten. Even its skin began to bleed. Buddhist abstinence blade. Zhuan sat under the Bodhi tree and made a gesture with his right hand. Suddenly, a huge Buddhist abstinence blade condensed in the ancient Buddha shadow's hand. Then he threw it. The sharp blade slashed at the 9-colored python's vital point. Puff! Chapter 1810. Late-stage earthly immortal realm. The 9-colored python's vitality was extremely tenacious. After its vital point was cut off by the Buddhist commandment blade, the two parts of its body actually twisted and wriggled crazily. Zhuan's eyes narrowed slightly. He turned into a stream of light and swept to the 9-colored python's side. He formed seals with his right hand again and again, using the power of the devouring curse seal to completely seal the 9-colored python in place. As time passed, the 9-colored python trapped in the seal also stopped moving and finally lost its vitality completely. Zhuan waved his sleeve and released the seal. Then, he took out a 9-colored snake gallbladder from the 9-colored python. His eyes flickered. The immortal qi contained in this snake gallbladder is very rich. Zhuan said with joy in his eyes. This lotus pond is filled with immortal qi all year round. This snake is probably the guardian beast of the 9-soul lotus. It was originally born in this lotus pond. The snake gallbladder probably contains the essence of immortal qi. This thing will have unimaginable benefits for your cultivation. Xiao He nodded and said. Zhuan nodded. With his observation skills, he could naturally see that the most precious things in the entire lotus pond were the 9-soul lotus and the 9-soul lotus root. The second most precious thing was the 9-colored python. It could be said that Zhuan had obtained the best things in the lotus pond this time. I wonder when Senior Shiji will finish discussing with the Lord of the Divine Tomb? After taking out the snake gallbladder, Zhuan looked around and began to worry about Shiji's safety. Although Shiji was very powerful, he was still barely passable compared to the Lord of the Divine Tomb. In addition, Shiji's cultivation had fallen too much compared to before. If the Lord of the Divine Tomb really wanted to deal with Shiji would probably be powerless to resist. Senior Shiji said that the Lord of the Divine Tomb was his old friend. He should be fine. But who is the Lord of the Divine Tomb? Zhuan murmured in a low voice. He was becoming more and more curious about the identity of the Lord of the Divine Tomb. Since Shiji hasn't returned, It's obvious that they haven't finished discussing. You can now cultivate in this lotus pond for a while. The immortal chi in this lotus pond is even richer than the deity pond. Moreover, the 9-colored python's gallbladder is connected to the 9-soul lotus in your body and contains the essence of immortal chi. It will be of unimaginable benefits for your cultivation, Xiaohei said. Zhuan nodded. He was absorbing immortal chi for 3 days in the deity pond. He had pushed his cultivation to the peak of the middle stage immortal realm and was not far from the late stage immortal realm. Now, the lotus pond was a place with even richer immortal chi than the deity pond. With the addition of the snake gallbladder and the 9-soul lotus, Zhuan knew that he would be able to successfully advance to the late stage immortal realm. Even Xiaohei couldn't help but sigh at Zhuan's luck. According to the cultivation method of an ordinary earth immortal, it would take at least 100 years to advance from the middle stage immortal realm to the late stage immortal realm. However, Zhuan was different. First, he had obtained a great opportunity in the deity pond. Now, he had obtained the 9-colored python's gallbladder and the 9-soul lotus from the lotus pond. It could be said that he had a great fortune. That was why he was able to have another breakthrough in such a short period of time. Thinking of this, Zhuan took a step with his right foot and rushed to the center of the lotus pond. He pinched the devouring curse seal and formed layers of defensive seals. Then he sat down cross-legged and took out the 9-soul lotus and the 9-colored python's gallbladder. Zhuan had separated the 9-soul lotus from the 9-soul lotus. Zhuan's eyes flashed. He placed the 9-colored python's gallbladder in the center of the 9-soul lotus. Then he clearly felt that the entire lotus pond was boiling. The immortal energy around the lotus pond surged wildly and turned into a terrifying whirlpool of immortal energy. The immortal energy whirlpool surged into the 9-colored python's gallbladder and the 9-soul lotus. Then, the 9-colored python's gallbladder slowly floated above the lotus. Kid, refine the 9-colored python's gallbladder and the 9-soul lotus. The immortal energy essence inside will be unimaginably beneficial to you. It's even better than the entire lotus pond, Xiaohei immediately reminded him. Zhuan didn't hesitate. He opened his mouth and spat out the 9 flames of karma. The 9-colored flames wrapped tightly around the 9-colored python's gallbladder and the 9-soul lotus. Time passed second by second. Zhuan had been sitting in the lotus pond for a whole month. During this month, Shiji had finished his discussion with the master of the divine tomb. However, seeing that Zhuan was still cultivating in the lotus pond, he didn't disturb him. Instead, he stood outside the hall and waited silently. On this day, Zhuan suddenly opened his eyes. The 9-colored python's gallbladder and the 9-soul lotus had already disappeared in front of him. Instead, they were replaced by a 9-colored liquid. The 9-colored liquid contained a shocking amount of energy. The energy was extremely concentrated, much more concentrated than the entire lotus pond below. I've finally finished refining it. Next, I'll have to see if this liquid can help me advance to the later stage of the Earth Immortal Realm. Zhuan's eyes flashed. He opened his mouth and sucked, immediately swallowing the 9 flames of karma. The 9-colored liquid wrapped around the 9 flames of karma was also sucked into Zhuan's mouth along with the 9 flames of karma. After sucking in the 9-colored liquid, Zhuan's face flushed red. His entire body was burning as if it was on fire. At the same time, the massive amount of energy contained in the 9-colored liquid circulated around Zhuan's body and finally gathered in Zhuan's dantian. Zhuan endured the pain of the powerful energy attacking his dantian. His forehead was covered in cold sweat and his eyes were as red as fire. Charge! Zhuan let out a low roar, and then his entire body exploded with a series of explosive sounds. It was as if there were countless bombs buried in his body, and at this moment, they exploded and spread out with a loud bang. A terrifying wave of air suddenly spread out from Zhuan's body, causing the entire lotus pond to ripple violently. The lotus flowers and leaves were blown away by the wave of air, one after another, bending in all directions. Outside the main hall, Shiji's eyes flashed. He stared at Zhuan's figure in the lotus pond and said in a low voice, "It seems that this kid has no problem breaking through." As soon as he finished speaking, A magnificent aura erupted from the lotus pond. The many lotus flowers and leaves in the lotus pond were crushed into powder by this aura. Waves surged up and immortal chi rolled over. It was a spectacular sight. In the middle of the lotus pond, a figure with long hair fluttering in the wind slowly stood up. Countless waves of air flowed up from his feet like a terrifying storm. Zhuan's eyes were filled with joy. He felt that the power in his body was endless. This power was much stronger than that of a middle-stage earthly immortal. Zhuan took a step forward and rushed out of the main hall. After Zhuan left, the originally turbulent lotus pond regained its calm. However, at this moment, the lotus pond was in a mess. "Greetings, Senior Shiji," Zhuan said respectfully. Shiji sized up Zhuan with a glance and revealed a look of admiration as he said, "Not bad." Zhuan looked at Shiji. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Senior, how did your discussion with the master of the divine tomb go?" Shiji looked at Zhuan and said with a smile, "He agreed to open up the ancient battlefield." Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. There was a trace of expectation in his heart. If this ancient battlefield was really opened up, perhaps he could really find out the truth of the catastrophe. Although Shiji found out the real culprit of the catastrophe from the chaotic divine temple, and it was a real divine transformation realm expert from the starry sky, where did this divine transformation realm expert go after the war? Whether Cangjie, the strongest person on the continent, was alive or dead was still a mystery. It was because of these many doubts that Shiji was so enthusiastic about opening up the ancient battlefield. Zhuan looked hesitant and said, "Senior, you said that the master of the divine tomb is an old friend of yours. Can you reveal the identity of the master of the divine tomb?" Shiji looked deeply at Zhuan and shook his head. "It's not that I don't want to say it, but this old friend doesn't want me to mention his name. He once said that when the time is right, he will naturally let you know his identity." Zhuan frowned slightly. He didn't expect the master of the divine tomb to be so secretive about his identity. However, since the master of the divine tomb didn't intend to reveal his identity, one wouldn't force him. "Let's leave now. Since the Nether Corpse Impasse has agreed to open up the ancient battlefield, the matter of opening up the ancient battlefield has been settled." As Shiji said that, he brought Zhuan out of the palace and directly walked out of the palace. At this moment, Dongfang Qinxing, Beichen Ruoli, Shimin Fei, and Nangong Haoren were no longer there. Instead, there were 4 Dao soldiers guarding the tombs. They quietly stared at the two of them. There was a bronze coffin floating above each of the Dao soldiers guarding the tombs. "It seems that the master has agreed to your suggestion?" A cold voice came from the northern coffin. It was Beichen Ruoli. Shiji nodded and said, "This matter has been settled. The two of us will also take our leave." The 4 coffins didn't answer. Instead, they slowly sank into the tombs of the true immortals. Although they didn't die back then, their injuries were too serious and their lifespans were reduced. It would be a great loss to them if they stayed outside the coffins. If there wasn't anything too serious, they wouldn't come out of the coffins. Previously, the 4 of them had to work together to open the restriction of the divine tomb, so they came out of the coffins for the first time. Shiji cupped his fists at the 4 of them. With a wave of his sleeve, he took Zhuan and turned into a ray of light that left the divine tomb. After Shiji and Zhuan left, Dongfang Qinxing's voice sounded, "Master, do you really intend to open up the ancient battlefield with the Chaos Temple? It's not like you don't know anything about the ancient battlefield. It's too difficult to find clues there. I've made up my mind. The opening of the ancient battlefield this time has a special meaning. Therefore, I must participate. I have a feeling that the opening of the ancient battlefield this time will be the time to settle the grudges left behind after 10,000 years." The indifferent voice of the divine tomb sounded. Chapter 1811. Ominous. When Shiji brought Zhuan back to the primal chaos divine temple, the divine master Do Hua personally welcomed them. After knowing that the master of the divine tomb had agreed to open up the primal battlefield, the smile on Do Hua's face became even wider and he became even more enthusiastic towards Shiji. In the dark hall, there was a rather large altar. In front of the altar, Old Man Gu stood quietly with his hands behind his back. The blue flames kept floating in the altar, illuminating Old Man Gu's face. It looked extremely strange. Behind Old Man Gu, Yuan looked rather nervous. He silently looked at Old Man Gu's back. Beside Yuan stood Shiji, and the Divine Master Do Hua also stood in front of the hall. Beside Yuan, there was a crystal coffin floating quietly. In the crystal coffin, a beautiful face lay peacefully, as if she had fallen into a deep sleep. The hall was silent. The three of them looked at Old Man Gu. "Little friend, give me the 9-soul lotus root. I need to refine the 9-soul lotus root with the fire in my sea of consciousness. After that, I will reconstruct a physical body for your wife that is compatible with her soul," Old Man Gu suddenly said. Zhuan nodded and handed the 9-soul lotus root to Old Man Gu without hesitation. Old Man Gu looked at the 9-soul lotus root with admiration in his eyes. After that, he directly threw the 9-soul lotus root into the blue flames on the altar. Old Man Gu refined the 9-soul lotus root for a total of 9 days. After that, Zhuan realized that the 9-soul lotus root had the shape of a human skeleton after being refined. Obviously, Old Man Gu was preparing to refine the 9-soul lotus root into a human skeleton. When the skeleton was completely refined, Old Man Gu flicked his finger and took out various precious materials from his spirit ring. Zhuan looked over and realized that most of the materials were warm medicinal herbs. Under Old Man Gu's control, the medicinal herbs turned into balls of medicinal liquid and gathered around the exposed skeleton. They began to squirm around the skeleton. Elder Gu refined it for another 18 days. The bones on the blue flames had long been replaced by a graceful body. However, the body was blood-red in color, as if there was no skin. It looked extremely strange. Suddenly, Elder Gu waved his sleeve, and the blue flames on the altar immediately dispersed, turning into 99 blue flames that surrounded the altar. "Zhuan, you are someone close to this woman. The final step requires someone close to her to use your lifespan to form her skin and flesh, completing the final step of forming her body. Are you willing to sacrifice your lifespan to save her?" 99 blue flames lingered around the altar like 99 stars. Old Gu's eyes flickered as he stared at Zhuan and asked indifferently. Shiji and Do Hua were both moved. Although their cultivation had reached the level of saints and their lifespans were as long as the heavens and earth, it did not mean that the lifespans of saints were endless. There was an end to it. Even the heavens and earth would dry up, let alone saints. Only with sufficient lifespan would one be able to break through to higher realms in the future. Lifespan was sometimes more important than cultivation. It was the foundation of a martial artist. Even for those close to them, very few people would sacrifice their lifespan to save the lives of those close to them. Moreover, Elder Gu had never said that he was absolutely certain that he could save Mu Chenshua. In Shiji and Do Hua's eyes, it was not worth it for Zhuan to use his lifespan to form her skin and flesh. "It's fine if you're unwilling. I still have a method that can completely reconstruct the body. However, I can't guarantee that the body will be compatible with the woman's collapsing soul." Elder Gu glanced at Zhuan indifferently and said with some mockery. Zhuan gently stared at the woman in the crystal coffin beside him. He said, "You've done far too much for me all this time. It's time for me to do something for you." Zhuan gently stroked the surface of the crystal coffin. The part he touched was the woman's beautiful face. Although there was a layer of crystal between them, Zhuan's gentle actions seemed like he was really stroking the woman's face. After that, Zhuan slowly raised his head and tapped the space between his eyebrows with his right hand. He gathered his lifespan at the tip of his right hand and pointed it at the altar. Milky white lifespan suddenly erupted and surged into the body. However, what Zhuan did not see was that the eyelids of the woman in the crystal coffin twitched unnoticeably the moment he poured his lifespan into the body. It was as if she wanted to open her eyes as much as she could, but her eyelids were too heavy and she could not open them. Shiji and Do Hua were rather moved as they looked at the young man who had offered his lifespan without hesitation. Elder Gu even exclaimed in surprise before nodding slightly. The 99 sparks in the surroundings represent 99 days. You must endure for 99 days. If you fail midway, this body will become a complete failure and all your previous efforts will be in vain, Elder Gu said indifferently. Shiji frowned slightly and said coldly, 99 days? That's too long. Even if Zhuowen is an earthly immortal with a long lifespan, 99 days is still a bit of a stretch, right? Elder Gu's eyes flickered as he said, if this kid can endure for 99 days, I will take out a life vitality pill to replenish a portion of Zhuowen's lifespan. Shiji wanted to say something but was interrupted by Zhuon. Senior Shiji, don't worry. I can endure for 99 days. I hope the three of you can wait outside the hall during these 99 days so that I won't be distracted. Shiji didn't say anything when he heard Zhuowen's words. Instead, he waved his sleeve and left the hall. Do Huan nodded at Elder Gu and also left the hall. Soon, only Zhuowen's lonely figure and the crystal coffin that floated beside him remained in the vast and empty hall. Chen Shui, we'll be able to meet very soon. Zhuon lowered his head and quietly looked at the beautiful woman in the crystal coffin. The smile on the corner of his mouth became gentler, but his face became paler and paler. His skin also became more and more wrinkled. However, what Zhuon didn't notice was that at the corner of the woman's right eye, an extremely fine crystal teardrop silently slid down. The 99 days quickly passed. Shiji, Elder Gu and Do Hua pushed open the door and slowly walked in. They saw that the 99 sparks around the altar in the center of the hall had completely disappeared. There was a graceful woman lying on top of the altar. This woman was covered in a thin white veil. Her eyes were slightly closed and the aura coming from her body was extremely faint. There was a crystal coffin floating under the altar. There was also a woman silently lying inside the crystal coffin. If one looked carefully, this woman's appearance was exactly the same as the woman on the altar. Beside the crystal coffin, there was a slightly stooped figure silently standing there. He raised his head and silently stared at the woman on the altar, just like a stone statue. The moment Shiji saw this figure, his pupils couldn't help shrinking. He saw that this figure had white hair and his skin was completely wrinkled. He looked like an 80 to 90-year-old man. From the wrinkled face, one could vaguely see Zhuowen's shadow. Shiji took a step forward and instantly arrived in front of Zhuon. He said in a deep voice, "Are you all right?" Zhuon slowly turned his head and looked at Shiji. He shook his head and smiled, "I'm fine. It's just that I've exhausted too much of my lifespan." As he spoke, Zhuon turned his head to look at Elder Gu and said, "Elder, the body has been completely condensed. Shouldn't you save my wife now?" Elder Gu looked at Zhuon with a complicated gaze. He didn't think that this young man would be willing to sacrifice a large portion of his lifespan just to condense a body that was extremely compatible with his wife's soul. Elder Gu nodded and came to Zhuowen's side. He then took out an elixir from his spirit ring and handed it to Zhuon. "This is the vitality elixir. It can replenish a portion of your lifespan. Take it first." Zhuon clasped his hands together and unceremoniously consumed the vitality elixir. Soon after, he felt his entire body become warm. His originally shriveled skin began to become round again, and the bark-like wrinkles gradually disappeared. In a short while, Zhuon returned to his youthful appearance from an old man in his 70s or 80s. However, Zhuon knew that this was only his outer appearance. He hadn't recovered much of his lifespan. Your lifespan has been depleted too much. If you want to completely recover, you can only rely on yourself in the future. Or rather, you can make another breakthrough and use the powerful energy you obtained to forcefully recover your lifespan, Elder Gu said with a complicated gaze. Zhuon casually nodded and said in a deep voice, "Elder, please save my wife first." Elder Gu nodded. Soon after, he waved his sleeve and swept up the body that was floating on the altar before him. After a brief examination, a satisfied expression appeared in his eyes. "Open the coffin lid. Next, I need to completely merge your wife's soul with this body. Once it's merged with the body, the rest will be easy," Elder Gu said nonchalantly. Zhuon did not hesitate. He clapped his right hand and immediately opened the coffin lid. Soon after, the woman in the crystal coffin trembled. It was as if she would be blown away by a gust of wind. Elder Gu's expression turned grave. Soon after, he took out a black hexahedral crystal from his spirit ring. He formed a seal with his right hand and immediately, Mu Qinshue's soul was absorbed by the black crystal. As the soul entered the black crystal, Yuan strangely discovered that the black crystal actually emitted a faint black light. However, the moment the black light lit up, a bone-chilling coldness spread out from the black light and spread throughout the hall. Zhuan could not help but shiver. Elder Gu's expression changed slightly. His gaze became extremely grave and solemn. He stared at Zhuan and said, "Before this woman was sealed in the crystal coffin, did you use the mysterious crystal ice soul to freeze her soul?" Chapter 1812. This is drunk. Senior, is there a problem? Zhuan asked rather nervously. Elder Gu frowned and sighed. There is a problem, and it's a huge problem. Whether it's the body or the soul, it's all about the balance of yin and yang. Once the yin is over, it'll be weak, and once the yang is over, it'll be overflowing. That's the law of nature. The mysterious crystal ice soul is an item of extreme yin and extreme coldness. It's indeed very effective for you to use it to prevent this woman's soul from collapsing, but it's also caused an excess of coldness in her soul, causing her soul to be extremely weak. That's because this soul is just too weak. Even though I've fused this soul into this new body, I don't dare to casually save her. That's because this woman's soul could very easily disperse in her current state. Elder Gu shook his head and sighed. He glanced at Zhuan and continued, "If I had opened this crystal coffin earlier to check on this woman's soul, I would never have accepted the promise of saving her. It's too difficult." Rumble. Zhuan only felt countless thunderclaps in his head, and then he could not help but stumble back. His face was drained of blood, and his entire body trembled. He never thought that things would develop to such a state. "How confident are you if you were to save her, Senior?" Zhuan asked reluctantly. Elder Gu said in a deep voice, "If this woman's yin and yang weren't out of balance, I'm 80% confident. Moreover, even if I failed, I could ensure that her soul wouldn't disperse. However, in the current situation, I'm afraid I'm only 10% confident. Moreover, if I fail, this woman's soul will only disperse." Zhuan took a few steps back, and the sorrow in his eyes grew denser. He said with difficulty, "Is there no other way?" Elder Gu's eyes flickered, and he said, "This woman's soul is actually too weak because of the mysterious crystal ice soul. If you can restore the yin and yang in her soul, it might be possible, but..." At this point, Elder Gu hesitated. Zhuan hurriedly asked, "But what?" "It's just that things that can balance the yin and yang in the depths of the soul are too rare. I've cultivated for countless years, but I've never seen anything that can balance the yin and yang in the depths of the soul," Old Man Gu said with an ashamed expression. Speaking of which, he had promised Zhuan that he would treat Mu Qinshuo. Now that he had suddenly said that he could not treat her, it was indeed damaging to his reputation. Zhuan's face was pale. After a long silence, he looked at Elder Gu and said, "Senior, please put my wife's soul into this body first." Old Man Gu nodded and did not say anything. Instead, he placed the black crystal between Mu Qinshuo's eyebrows. Then, he formed a series of seals with his right hand. Immediately, the soul contained within the black crystal slowly entered her body. Moreover, as the soul fused with the body, the face of the body was no longer pale. Instead, it appeared to be a lot rosier. Zhuan silently looked at the woman in front of him. The sorrow in his eyes became more and more intense. With a soft sigh, he closed the crystal coffin again and silently left the hall. "Your wife still has a chance to live. You can't give up so easily. If you can find something that can balance the yin and yang, then your wife can still be saved," Shiji said to Zhuan's back as he could not bear to see him leave. Zhuan's footsteps paused. He did not turn around. He only nodded and left the hall. In the dim loft, Zhuan silently sat on a cushion. In front of him was a crystal coffin. At this moment, the crystal coffin had already been opened. Zhuan silently stroked Mu Qinshuo's flawless face. The sorrow in his eyes became more and more intense. "Qinshuo, I'm useless. I can't cure you. I once swore that I could, but I couldn't do it in the end." Speaking to this point, the bitterness on Zhuan's face became even more intense. Then he picked up the jug of wine by his feet and drank it all. "Do you know? When I found out that even Gugu was not confident in curing you, how much pain did I feel? I really hate myself for being so useless. Zhuan hammered his chest over and over again. It was as if he wanted to completely release the bitterness in his heart through this method. Zhuan drank mouthful after mouthful of wine without stopping. Gradually, a blush appeared on his cheeks. His eyes became blurred and blank. In the end, he lay on the crystal coffin's lid. At this moment, he was completely drunk. It was also the first time he was completely drunk since he started cultivating. However, he did not notice that when he was drunk, the beautiful woman in the crystal coffin shed a tear once again. In the primal chaos temple, an earth-shattering roar suddenly rang out. It was like the 9 heavens' profound thunder, rumbling and rousing countless warriors in the primal chaos temple. Bush. Warriors flew out from their respective residences. They saw Tao Tai, who was carrying the central palace, walking over step by step. Then it suddenly jumped into the starry sky outside the primal chaos temple. Then, Tao Tai suddenly opened its mouth and a huge black hole appeared in its mouth. Then, Tao Tai suddenly pointed its mouth at the area where the primal chaos temple was located. Does Tao Tai want to swallow the primal chaos temple? How can it swallow it? Seeing Tao Tai's actions, many warriors present had strange looks on their faces. The primal chaos temple was extremely large and it was countless times bigger than Tao Tai. Tao Tai's actions clearly showed that it wanted to swallow the entire primal chaos temple. This made many warriors in the temple puzzled. Boom, boom, boom. The black hole in Tao Tai's mouth continued to expand. In an instant, it covered the entire primal chaos temple. Then, Tao Tai suddenly swallowed and with the help of the terrifying black hole, it directly swallowed the entire temple. Then, the Tao Tai suddenly dropped down like a meteor, falling toward the Middle Earth. Rumble! The Tao Tai landed in a rather desolate place in the Central Plains. This place was desolate and uninhabited. The moment the Tao Tai landed, a terrifying vibration began to spread out. Soon after, most of the Central Plains felt this terrifying vibration, causing many martial artists to panic. Tao Tai suddenly jumped out of the huge hole. Then he opened his mouth and spat out. The black hole appeared again and the primal chaos temple slowly appeared in it. Back to the central region? Inside the primal chaos temple, there were many warriors from the Central Plains. Seeing the surrounding environment, they all revealed strange expressions. They really didn't know why Tao Tai had suddenly done this. Suddenly, more than 10 figures flew out of the central palace on Tao Tai's back. The 2 in front were the divine masters, Do Hua and Shiji. Behind Do Hua and Shiji were Old Gu and the 4 masters of the battlefield. Then, there were He Wushang, Ji Wubing, and the other ancestors of the Holy Rune families. At this moment, Do Hua's eyes flickered with excitement. He turned around and cupped his fists to the people behind him. This time, we will have to trouble you to open up the primordial battlefield. Old Gu and I will be in charge of the shattered centipede abyss of the 6 perilous lands. I will be in charge of the Taiyin battlefield. When the time comes, send a few people to the Taiyin battlefield with me, the master of Taiyin said in a low voice. I will be in charge of the sun battlefield. I will be in charge of the primordial battlefield. I will be in charge of the great void battlefield. The master of Taiyin, the master of primordial, and the master of Taiyin responded one by one. They also chose suitable candidates from the other celestial immortal patriarchs to go to their respective perilous lands. Brother Shi, I will leave the nether corpse extremist to you. Do Hua cupped his fist to Shiji. Shiji nodded. Then he took a deep look at Zhuowen's residence in the Chaos Temple and sighed softly. To ensure Zhuowen's safety, I will go to the nether corpse extremis alone. Do Hua said seriously, Brother Shi, don't worry. With me, Do Hua, here, no one will dare to hurt Zhuowen at all. If anyone dares to hurt Nguyen, I will issue a celestial murdering order and chase them to the ends of the earth. The master of Taiyin, He Wushang, and Wei Wuyin's faces immediately darkened. The celestial murdering order was not simple. Once it was used, the wanted person would become a fugitive. Even they did not dare to face the celestial murdering order. Shurji cupped his fists and turned into a long streak of light that shot towards the Nether Corpse extremis. After Shurji left, the Master of Tyene, the Master of Tyene, the Master of Primordial, and the Master of Tyene all brought their chosen patriarchs and headed towards the 4 battlefields. Let's go too. I'm looking forward to the primordial battlefield this time. Do Hua's eyes burned with passion. He and Patriarch Gu also disappeared. After Do Hua and the others left, a tall figure stood quietly on a roof in the Chaos Temple. The primordial battlefield is about to open. Speaking of which, I'm looking forward to the primordial battlefield this time. The person yawned lazily. Then, he summoned a green Qilin and silently left the range of the Chaos Temple. Even though the restrictions around the Chaos Temple were powerful, they were nothing in front of this person. Not long after this person left, a beautiful figure slowly landed on the roof where this person was. Her beautiful eyes were filled with complex emotions and hatred. She muttered in a low voice, "Yang Yi, are you really so heartless? You used my relationship with the Patriarch to obtain the spinning thorn sacred symbol through despicable means. Do you think I wouldn't know it was you just because you covered your face back then? I sensed the aura of the spiral stab sacred rune on your body the moment I saw you. You can't hide from me." Swoosh. As soon as the woman finished speaking, the sound of something breaking through the air came from behind her. It was aimed at her back as if it was going to kill her. The woman's face changed drastically. She stomped her foot on the ground and dodged the attack like a ghost. However, the moment the woman dodged the piercing sound, a black vortex silently swept out like a needle and directly pierced through the woman's right thigh. The woman screamed and immediately fell to the ground. Her right thigh was covered in blood, and she looked miserable. What a foolish woman. If you had pretended that you didn't know anything, you might have been able to keep your life. Unfortunately, you're too difficult to tame. It's troublesome to keep you alive. Chapter 1813. Beware of Yang Yi. The black-veiled woman stared coldly at Yang Yi and said, "Yang Yi, I trusted you too much back then. I didn't expect you to be so ambitious. This is the chaotic divine temple. I don't believe you dare to kill me." Yang Yi sneered and said, "This place has been enveloped by the power of the spinning thorn saint rune. Ordinary people can't detect it. Go ahead." Yang Yi showed no mercy. He pointed with his right hand and the space around the black-veiled woman suddenly distorted and began to collapse. Yang Yi was too strong. Situ Nianyue was no match for him. The moment the space distorted, blood mist burst out of her body. Her pretty face was pale and bloodless. "Yang Yi, the spinning stab saint rune belongs to the spinning stab family. You're an outsider, so how much power can you unleash? Today, I'll use my blood to seal the power of your rune." Situ Nianyue's beautiful eyes were full of resentment. She bit the tip of her tongue and spat out a mouthful of essence blood. Then her hands kept forming seals. The essence blood turned into an imperceptible blood needle and shot towards the spinning thorn saint rune. Humph! Yang Yi snorted coldly and stretched out his right hand to grab the blood needle. He could feel that the blood needle wasn't ordinary. If it really touched the spinning thorn saint rune, it might really be troublesome. "You won't succeed." Situ Nianyue was like a moth darting into a flame. She appeared in front of the blood needle in an instant and immediately detonated her Yuan spirit. Rumble! The terrifying power of the Yuan spirit explosion spread out, causing Yang Yi's pupils to shrink. He didn't expect Situ Nianyue to be so decisive and choose to detonate her Yuan spirit. Yang Yi had no choice but to take a few steps back. Immortal Yuan gushed out of his right hand and he said, "Immortal art, infinite void." Suddenly, the area where the Yuan spirit was detonated was isolated, forming an oval independent void. The explosion continued to erupt in this independent void. It was precisely because of this delay that Yang Yi missed the opportunity to intercept the blood needle. The blood needle plunged into the huge whirlpool barrier formed by the spiral stab holy runes. Then, the barrier collapsed one after another and turned back into a talisman. However, there was a drop of blood on the talisman. It wasn't obvious, but it made Yang Yi's face turn gloomy. He found that as the blood stained the spinning thorn Saint Rune, he had a feeling that he had lost control of the spinning thorn Saint Rune. She's going to bite me even before she dies? Yang Yi's eyes narrowed, but then he shook his head and left this place with waning interest. It was so quiet that no one noticed him. In the gloomy attic, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His gaze passed through the window and looked in the direction of Yang Yi and Sinyue. Just now, the primordial origin in his body had faintly trembled. He knew that only a Saint Rune could cause the origin to tremble. Zhuowen patted his forehead and looked at the beautiful woman in the crystal coffin. He murmured, "I'll only get drunk this time. Qin Shui, as long as there's a glimmer of hope, I'll definitely cure you. Wait for me, okay?" Zhuowen put the crystal coffin into his spirit ring. At the same time, he took out Wei Rui's Yuan spirit. His eyes were like lightning. He reached out with his right hand and immediately extracted the origin of the beast envoy Saint Rune from the Yuan spirit. Zhuowen's right hand touched the space between his eyebrows and took out the talisman that contained the primordial source. This talisman was the combination of 3 talismans. Therefore, Zhuowen had temporarily named it the primordial talisman. After the primitive talisman absorbed a trace of the beast envoy Saint Talisman's origin energy, its aura had clearly strengthened quite a bit. The origin energy emitted by the primitive talisman made Zhuowen feel refreshed. Since the celestial Saint Master was unable to cure Qin Shui, perhaps the legendary divine transformation realm cultivator has a way to cure Qin Shui's soul. Moreover, if I can reach the divine transformation realm and obtain the star plate that the old Taoist mentioned, I'll be able to travel through the starry sky. The starry sky is so vast, I don't believe that there isn't a medicine that can balance the yin and yang. Zhuowen's eyes sparkled. The disheartened feeling in his heart had completely disappeared in this moment. He knew that at least Qin Shui did not have any hope. As long as there was a trace of hope, he, Zhuowen, would not give up. Suddenly, Zhuowen noticed a handkerchief by the window. This handkerchief was very unremarkable. If it wasn't for Zhuowen's sharp senses, he would not have noticed this handkerchief. Of course, the reason why he noticed this handkerchief was mainly because it faintly emitted a familiar aura. Picking up the handkerchief, this aura hit him in the face, causing Zhuowen's eyes to narrow. This aura was not unfamiliar to him, it was the aura of Situ Nianyue that he had noticed before. With Situ Nianyue's cultivation, it is impossible for her to silently place this item by the window. She should have placed it here after I was drunk. But why did she place it here? Zhuowen silently looked at the handkerchief in his hand. Then his eyes suddenly narrowed. Following that, he used the origin talisman's power to sweep across the handkerchief. Following that, a line of sparkling words appeared on the handkerchief. Staring at this line of words, Zhuowen's body trembled. He muttered in a low voice, "Be careful of Yang Yi? It seems that Situ Nianyue really does know Yang Yi. I have to ask Situ Nianyue face to face. What secret does she know about Yang Yi?" With that, Zhuowen disappeared from the attic. Following his memory, he came to the attic where Situ Nianyue was. However, he found that Situ Nianyue was not in the attic, and the Chaos Temple was nowhere to be seen. Following that, Zhuowen went to look for Yang Yi, but he found that Yang Yi was also not in the Chaos Temple. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. He increasingly felt that Yang Yi was a little strange. Coupled with Situ Nianyue's reminder and Jian Mu's current state of being a living dead, Yang Yi was extremely suspicious. "My lord, Jian Mu has woken up. Do you want to enter the Azure Dragon Hall to take a look?" Suddenly, Long Tian's voice rang in his mind. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He returned to his attic and entered the Azure Dragon Hall's Azure Dragon Square. Long Tian stood quietly on the side of the square. Beside him, Jian Mu was heavily bound. Jian Mu's strength was terrifying. If he wasn't bound, Long Tian wouldn't be able to stop him if he went crazy again, let alone guard him. At this moment, Jian Mu was constantly shaking his head. His eyes were filled with confusion. Soon he saw Zhuowen. His eyes lit up as he said in a deep voice, Zhuowen came to Jian Mu's side and carefully observed his condition. He found that Jian Mu didn't seem to be in disguise. He removed many of the shackles on Jian Mu's body and muttered, Brother Jianmu, do you still remember what happened to you? Jianmu's eyes were filled with confusion. He subconsciously shook his head. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He took out a bead. The surface of the bead emitted light. Then an image appeared. The image was of Jianmu, who was wearing a ghost mask, chasing after Zhuowen in the shattered nightmare abyss. When Zhuowen removed the ghost mask and revealed Jianmu's face, the image came to an abrupt end. How is this possible? How could I do such a thing? Also, when did my cultivation base become so strong? Jianmu quickly noticed his powerful cultivation base. He could not help but reveal a look of shock. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. He said in a deep voice, "What happened when you followed Yang Yi to the Central Plains?" Jianmu was silent. He sighed and said, "When I first came to the Central Plains, senior brother Yang Yi took good care of me. Later, he asked me if I wanted to have more power. At that time, I indeed longed for power, so I agreed without hesitation. Then, senior brother Yang Yi knocked me out. After that, I lost consciousness. I only woke up now." Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes darkened. Jianmu's words didn't seem to be false. Then all the problems lay with Yang Yi. That Yang Yi is definitely the one who framed you with the ghost mask. If I'm not wrong, Yang Yi's goal is the sacred symbol. Xiao He said with a gloomy look in his eyes. Zhuowen took a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down. However, his eyes were extremely cold. Yang Yi was really scheming. He actually hid it from Zhuowen for so long. It was hard for Zhuowen to imagine that not long ago, Yang Yi was still chatting and laughing with him. How could he have imagined that the person who was chatting and laughing with him was the murderer who wanted to kill him? It would be great if Senior Shiji or the Divine Master Do Hua were here. I could use their power to find out Yang Yi's whereabouts. Unfortunately, Yun shook his head. When he walked out of the attic, he had heard that Do Hua had left the chaotic temple with the 4 battlefield masters, Shiji, and more than 10 ancestor-level experts. They were all heading towards the 6 danger zones. Rumble. Suddenly, a thunderous sound resounded in the sky. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. He said a few words to Jianmu and left the Azure Dragon Hall. Walking out of the pavilion, Zhuowen looked towards the source of the sound and saw that in the horizon ahead, an incomparably vast and enormous independent small world was suddenly flying towards them. Taking a closer look, this independent small world was in the shape of a huge abyss. In the deepest part of the abyss, there was a terrifying fragment continent that stretched as far as the eye could see. The shattered nightmare abyss. Zhuowen stared blankly at this scene. Wasn't this independent small world one of the 6 danger zones, the shattered nightmare abyss? In front of the shattered nightmare abyss, Do Hua and Elder Gu moved hundreds of thousands of miles with each step. They carried the huge shattered nightmare abyss and walked towards the desolate place where the chaotic temple was located. Rumble. The moment the shattered nightmare abyss flew over, Zhuowen discovered that there were also 4 long rainbows slowly flying over from 4 other directions in the sky. Looking at it from afar, the true appearance of these 4 rainbows was actually 4 small worlds. Within these small worlds were 4 extremely vast battlefields. Chapter 1814. Ancient Battlefield Phantom. When the masters of the 4 battlefields moved the Lunar Battlefield, Solar Battlefield, Primeval Battlefield and Great Void Battlefield over, they all nodded at Do Hua. At this moment, all the cultivators in the Central Plains were shocked. They all looked up at the sky and stared blankly at the 5 danger zones that were surrounded by 5 small worlds. The shattered nightmare abyss, the lunar battlefield, the solar battlefield, the ancient battlefield, and the great void battlefield. 5 of the 6 danger zones in the Central Plains have been forcefully removed. What is the Chaos Temple planning to do? Countless warriors in the central region were horrified. Only the leaders of some powerful forces with high positions could vaguely guess the intention of the Chaos Temple. Their eyes were filled with excitement. Now, only the Nether Corpse Forbidden Ground is left. Master God, do you think Shiji will go back on his word? Above the shattered nightmare abyss, Elder Gu asked worriedly. Isn't Zhuowen Shiji's disciple? If Shiji really does go back on his word, then how about I deal with Zhuowen? The master of Taiyin said ambiguously. Dou Hua's eyes flashed. He didn't answer the master of Taiyin's question directly. Instead, he said calmly, "Let's wait a little longer. The Nether Corp's forbidden ground isn't simple. After all, it's the most mysterious of the 6 danger zones." Hearing this, the master of Taiyin's eyes narrowed. However, he couldn't say anything. About 2 hours later, the entire Central Plains began to tremble violently. The trembling became more and more intense. It was as if something was crawling out from the depths of the ground. Feeling the trembling, Dou Hua's eyes flashed. He stared at the ground below him. Rumble. On the other side of the desolate land from the Chaos Temple, the ground began to collapse horribly. Furthermore, it formed a terrifyingly huge black hole. Within the black hole, a huge spherical barrier slowly rose from the depths of the black hole. Upon closer inspection, there was a small world within the barrier. The small world was like a fairyland, with tall mountains, flowing rivers and waterfalls. Around these beautiful landscapes, coffins could be clearly seen. There were also many places with good feng shui, and their auras were like dragons. The most eye-catching part of the boundary was a huge palace in the center. This palace was the mausoleum of the Lord of the Divine Tomb, and it was surrounded by 4 immortal tombs. After the Nether Corp's extremis was enveloped by a barrier and slowly emerged from the ground, numerous gazes converged onto it. Especially Dou Hua, the 4 lords of the battlefield, and the other heavenly immortal realm experts, all of their gazes revealed a wisp of terror. The moment the Dark Corp's forbidden ground appeared, it exuded a terrifying aura that far surpassed that of the 4 battlefields and the shattered nightmare abyss. Countless beings in the Central Plains prostrated themselves before this aura, trembling in fear. As expected of the most mysterious danger zone among the 6 great danger zones, the aura of the Nether Corp's extremity is so powerful and terrifying. Dou Hua's eyes were bright. He knew very well that with the help of the Nether Corp's extremity, the opening of the primordial battlefield would be much easier. Shiji stood quietly above the palace in the Nether Corp's extremity. He looked up at Dou Hua in the sky and nodded slightly. "Thank you, Brother Shi and the Lord of the Divine Tomb, for your help. If the opening of the primordial battlefield is successful, the 2 of you can be said to have contributed greatly." Dou Hua laughed heartily. Shiji smiled and said, "We're just taking what we need. Let's cut the crap. Since the 6 great danger zones have been gathered, let's start opening the primordial battlefield with the 6 great danger zones." A faint voice came from the Divine Tomb. It was like the sound of an empty valley. The instant it filled everyone's ears, everyone fell into a state of absent-mindedness. Apart from Dou Hua, Elder Gu, the 4 lords of the battlefield, and other experts above the true immortal realm, the dozen or so heavenly immortal realm experts and other cultivators fell into a state of absent-mindedness. Although it was only for a moment, if someone beside them had evil intentions, it was enough to seriously injure them and kill them. After coming back to their senses, everyone, including Dou Hua and the 4 lords of the battlefield, revealed a look of fear. In particular, Dou Hua stared at the huge palace in the Nether Corp's extremity with an extremely strong look of fear in his eyes. Although he was not absent-minded because of the voice just now, he was still in a trance for a moment. Just the voice alone could make him feel a little absent-minded. Then what if the Lord of the Divine Tomb came out? Wouldn't he be able to completely crush him? It seems that this person is really likely to be a demigod who survived the primordial age. I just don't know who it is. Dou Hua frowned slightly. The ancient books of the Primal Chaos Temple recorded that in the primordial age, apart from the strongest Songjie, there were 2 other demigods. These 2 demigods were Zhan Bai and Qiao Yu. Both of them were illustrious figures, but Dou Hua did not know which of the 3 was buried in the Divine Tomb. Moreover, he also knew that to be able to survive that tragic battle, his internal injuries must have reached an extremely terrifying level. This was the main reason why the Lord of the Divine Tomb had been buried in the Nether Corp's extremity all this time. If the thing mentioned in the ancient books is true, perhaps I can really completely transcend this continent. Neither Shiji nor the Lord of the Divine Tomb can compete with me. A cold look flashed across Do Hua's eyes, but he quickly recovered and said with a smile, "The Lord of the Divine Tomb is right. Now, let's start opening the primordial battlefield. I hope the Lord of the Divine Tomb can extract the origin source of the Nether Corpse extremity." The 6 danger zones were formed when the primordial battlefield fell apart. Only by combining the origin source of the primordial battlefield can the primordial battlefield be successfully opened. Okay. The Lord of the Divine Tomb was straightforward. After he finished speaking, a blazing white light burst out from the palace and flew into the sky. "Sorry to trouble you for." Do Hua turned around and cupped his fist towards the lords of the 4 great battlefields. The lords of the 4 great battlefields controlled the lifelines of the 4 great battlefields, so they naturally controlled the origins of the 4 great battlefields. The lords of Taiyin, Taiyang, Archik, and Taishu all nodded. They then formed hand seals and used their great abilities to extract the origins of the 4 great battlefields. After the origins of the Nether Corpse extremity rose, 4 similar balls of white light burst out from the 4 great battlefields. However, these 4 balls of white light were much smaller than the one in the Nether Corpse extremity. The 5 balls of white light were filled with an extremely strange power. Many cultivators could not see what was hidden in the 5 balls of white light. However, Zhuwen was able to see it. The 4 Saint Talisman origins in his Sea of Consciousness were the primordial origins, which made Zhuwen's eyes extremely bright as he saw through the 5 origins. Those are hands, feet, and bodies? Zhuwen was surprised when he saw what was hidden in the 5 balls of origins. He discovered that the 4 balls of origins that burst out from the 4 great battlefields were actually hiding hands and feet. The balls of origins that burst out from the Nether Corpse extremity contained a huge body floating in the air. The moment Zhuwen saw the hands, feet, and body, he immediately thought of the strange head that Do Hua and Elder Gu had taken away in the Shattered Elephant Abyss. Could it be that the hands, feet, and body were all part of the white-haired head? Then what was the true identity of the white-haired head? Zhuwen's gaze immediately fell on Do Hua and Elder Gu. "Elder Gu," Do Hua said to Old Gu, who was beside him. Old Gu nodded and flicked his finger. Another ball of white light rose up. However, in this ball of white light, there was no one. Zhuwen's gaze swept over and landed on the ball of white light. Sure enough, he saw the white-haired head that Do Hua and Elder Gu had taken away. At this moment, the white-haired head's eyes were extremely cold and filled with anger. He was muttering something, probably cursing something. However, the ball of white light had a soundproof effect, so the white-haired head's voice couldn't be heard. The 6 balls of white light rose to the highest point in the sky and began to slowly approach each other. When the 6 balls of light finally fused together, a vast aura spread across the central plains like a torrential rain. This aura was very terrifying. It was like Mount Tai that pressed down on countless living beings in the central plains, causing many weak people to involuntarily kneel on the ground. In the eyes of others, the 6 white balls of light were slowly fusing together. However, in Zhuwen's eyes, the severed arms, legs, body, and head in the white balls of light were slowly fusing together as if they were piecing together building blocks. However, when the white-haired man's body was completely pieced together, extremely powerful white chains suddenly swept out from the surrounding balls of light. The white chains were divided into 6 parts, tightly binding the white-haired man's neck, hands, feet, and body. After the white chain trapped the white-haired man, the man's eyes became more and more angry. He muttered something as if he was cursing something. The white chain began to squirm as if it was absorbing the white-haired man's power. As the white chains continued to absorb the white-haired man's energy, a terrifying white light pillar condensed above the ball of white light. The white light pillar rushed to the end of the sky, then the white brilliance dissipated in all directions. It was like thin white lines that spread across the entire sky. At this moment, the sky of the Central Plains, or rather, the sky of the entire Heavenly Armor continent, was filled with white lines. These white lines continued to squirm and spread. When they reached the end of the sky of the Heavenly Armor continent, they stopped. Then these lines began to condense crazily. This crazy condensation lasted for half a day. Then, a huge illusory continent appeared in the sky above the heavenly armor continent. This illusory continent was very large. It was in ruins and was in a mess, as if it was a battlefield after a great battle. Corpses could be seen everywhere, piled up like mountains. All kinds of broken weapons stood in this battlefield. There were so many of them that they stretched as far as the eye could see. Chapter 1815. Opening up, Shurji's eyes flickered. He stared at the shadow of the continent suspended under the starry sky with excitement. But very quickly his gaze fell on the ball of light below the continent and he said in a deep voice, "Wouldn't it be inappropriate to use Ganji's star god power to recreate the ancient battlefield? After all, this sky was the source of the disaster back then." The Lord of the Tomb God was silent for a moment, and then he said in a deep voice, "Back then, Lord Songjia led all the sages of the heavenly armor continent and gathered everyone's strength. He sacrificed the energy of the heavenly armor star, which was the most important energy source of the heavenly armor continent, and sealed Ganji's power completely. Even if Gangu escaped, his strength is only at the level of a demigod. The reason why I agreed to open up the ancient battlefield is to find Lord Songjia's trace. I don't believe he is dead. I have a hunch that he is in the ancient battlefield. As long as we can find Lord Songjia, with his strength and courage, he will definitely be able to rejuvenate the heavenly armor continent." Shurji fell silent. He stared at the shadow of the continent in the sky and said, "Since you have made up your mind, I will not say anything more. Now it's time to materialize the ancient battlefield, right?" The Lord of the Tomb God responded faintly. Immediately, the boundary around the Nether Corpse impasse shattered. Then, the coffins in the Nether Corpse impasse all flew out. They were densely packed together by the Lord of the Tomb God. The densely packed coffins floated in the sky. The aura that erupted from them was extremely terrifying. The weakest among them was an earthly immortal, while the strongest had reached the peak of the celestial immortal realm and was only half a step away from the genuine immortal realm. However, the owners of these coffins were all seriously injured 10,000 years ago. They were allowed to be buried in the Nether Corpse impasse under the protection of the Lord of the Tomb God. It could be said that they were greatly indebted to the Lord of the Tomb God. "You have stayed in the Nether Corpse impasse for long enough. Next, I will use the Nether Corpse impasse to open up the ancient battlefield. Offer half of your lifespan, or you will die." The Lord of the Tomb God said impolitely, "My lord, after we offer half of our lifespan, can we also enter the ancient battlefield? We were originally on the verge of death. It was not easy for us to accumulate some lifespan. Time without the Nether Corpse impasse, we could not break through in this time, and without the Nether Corpse impasse, we will not live for long." A square black coffin's black coffin. Square black coffin coffin, square coffin coffin realm. The coffin was a genuine immortal realm. The owner of this coffin was immortal quas realm was realm immortal. The 10 great corpse kings are very famous in the Nether Corpse impasse. They are the 10 strongest coffins in the Tomb God region. At the same time, they occupy the 10 best feng shui treasured lands in the Nether Corpse impasse. All of them are heavenly immortals. While Zhuan was puzzled by the 10 great corpse kings, a clear voice came from behind him. Yuan Hongwen and Ji Chenyan were walking side by side. This was especially so for Yuan Hongwen. The instant he met Zhuo Wen's gaze, an extremely terrifying fighting spirit burst forth from his eyes. Zhuo Wen had a bitter expression when he felt Yuan Hongwen's battle intent. Yuan Hongwen wasn't a bad person. He was just a little arrogant. Ever since he had lost to Zhuo Wen, Yuan Hongwen would reveal his battle intent every time they met in the Chaos Temple. This gave Zhuo Wen a headache. "Miss Ji, brother Yuan." Zhuo cupped his fists. Ji Chenyan covered her mouth and smiled. She looked at Zhuo from head to toe and found that she could no longer see through Zhuo. Her beautiful eyes revealed a trace of surprise. "Late earthly immortal realm. Zhuo, your cultivation is advancing really fast." Yuan Hongwen also looked at Zhuo and could not help but praise him. Ji Chenyan's beautiful eyes narrowed. She looked at Zhuo with a complicated expression. When she first met Zhuo, She remembered that Juan was only a half-immortal. How long had it been since then? It was unbelievable that he had broken through again. Brother Yuan is not bad. Judging from your aura, you are not far away from becoming a heavenly immortal. Juan replied politely. Yuan Hongwen smiled faintly. Then he looked at the black square coffin in the sky and said, after entering the antiquity battlefield, let's fight again. I was not willing to accept my defeat. Juan smiled and said, when the time comes, I will accompany you at any time. As he spoke, Juan looked at Ji Chenyan and asked, Miss Ji, can you tell me the origin of the 10 Corpse Kings? Ji Chenyan shook her head and said, I don't know the origin of the 10 Corpse Kings. I only know that the 10 Corpse Kings are called by the other corpses in the Serene Corpse desolate grounds. The one in the black square coffin is the first Corpse King, the leader of the 10 Corpse Kings. Juan nodded. He looked at the 10 coffins with a solemn expression. The 10 Corpse Kings were not simple. Their combat strength was not weaker than the Saint Talisman clan's ancestor. In a sense, the 10 Corpse Kings gave him a stronger sense of danger than the Saint Talisman clan's ancestor. The Lord of the Divine Tomb pondered for a moment and said to Do Hua, give me another 10 spots. Do Hua's eyes flickered as he nodded. He took out the ancient boulder and said, 10 Corpse Kings, engrave your names on this ancient boulder. Then, you will be qualified to enter the primordial battlefield as the first batch. Clang! The 10 Corpse Kings did not hesitate. They opened the coffin lids and stretched out their skinny hands. They pointed at the void and carved their names into the boulder. Then, the coffin lids closed. Do Hua put away the boulder and said indifferently, as for the others, I need to find a suitable passage in the antiquity battlefield. When the time comes, the passage to the antiquity battlefield will be opened. At that time, everyone will be qualified to enter the antiquity battlefield. Although Do Hua's words caused the other coffin lords to be dissatisfied, no one refuted. Whether it was Do Hua, the Lord of the Divine Tomb, or the 4 lords of the antiquity battlefield, they were all true immortal experts. They could not afford to offend such experts. To put it bluntly, a true immortal expert could kill most of them with a flip of his hand. Offer half of your lifespan. The Lord of the Divine Tomb continued. The 10 Corpse Kings fell silent for a moment. Then, they offered half of their lifespan and rushed into the Divine Tomb. Following the example of the 10 Corpse Kings, the other coffin lords had no choice but to offer half of their lifespan. After offering their lifespan, the coffin lords turned into streaks of light and left this place. They planned to find a place with dense yin qi in the central region as a temporary resting place while waiting for the passage to the antiquity battlefield to open. After all, they were not fated to be the first batch to enter the antiquity battlefield. Moreover, the yang qi here was too strong. It was not beneficial to them. Let's start opening the antiquity battlefield, Do Hua said in a deep voice. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum responded, and then the snow-capped plateau of the Divine Mausoleum that stood in the center of the Nether Corpse Extremis all year round suddenly separated from the Nether Corpse Extremis. Then, under the control of the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum, it flew towards the ancient battlefield phantom above. Then, the 4 lords of the antiquity battlefield sent the 4 battlefields into the sky. Finally, it was the shattered centipede abyss behind Do Hua and Elder Gu. When the 6 danger zones gathered in the antiquity battlefield, they began to attract each other like magnets. Moreover, the surfaces of the 6 danger zones began to squirm and fuse together. In the deepest part of the shattered centipede abyss, a behemoth was lying quietly amidst the endless black mist. This behemoth was shaped like a whale, and the water spouts on its back were spewing out endless black mist, covering the behemoth's body. Jun was no stranger to this behemoth. It was the Luo Yen whale that he had mistakenly entered. In the depths of the Luo Yen whale, a masked woman wearing a black veil slowly opened her eyes. She felt the entire shattered centipede abyss trembling. It seems that the antiquity battlefield is about to be opened. I have to hurry up and completely refine the center of the Luo Yen whale. Only then can I go out and help Jun, she muttered. The woman softly muttered. Soon after, she continued to sit cross-legged, as though she was cultivating something. The 6 danger zones constantly wriggled and fused together before finally fusing together. However, the moment the 6 danger zones fused together, they wriggled even faster. In the end, they turned into a fragmented continent that was hundreds of thousands of kilometers in size. This fragment of a continent was suspended below the Antiquity battlefield Phantom. Then, the white lines that formed the Antiquity battlefield Phantom suddenly went crazy and gathered in this fragment of a continent hundreds of thousands of miles large. In an instant, this fragment of a continent was wrapped in countless white lights. On the surface of the continent, there were many runes squirming, like ancient restrictions. The central palace of your chaotic divine temple was refined by Lord Songjia. The origin of the sky worm should be suppressed in the central palace, right? You should also suppress Gonggu in your central palace. It will be safer this way, the Lord of the Divine Tomb suddenly said to Do Hua. Do Hua glanced at the Lord of the Divine Tomb and nodded. Then, Tai, who was carrying the central palace, jumped up and swept to the light cluster suspended in the sky. Then, it opened its mouth and swallowed the light cluster. Finally, the black hole appeared again and swallowed the light cluster. The 99 chaotic war gods and the Taoist friends that I have personally appointed follow me to the transmission continent. Without this transmission continent, it will be difficult for you to enter the Antiquity battlefield. Do Hua said loudly. Then he swept to the top of the central palace. Then Tao Tai under the central palace stepped on the air and rushed to the continent that was emitting a terrifying white light. Chapter 1816. The War of the Heavenly Gods. Let's go! The 10 corpse kings said coldly as they turned into 10 streaks of black light and shot into the sky. Young Master Zhua, Chenyan will be leaving with the ancestor. Ji Chenyan bowed to Zhuan and was taken away by the ancestor of the Eternity family, Ji Wubing. We'll meet in the primordial battlefield. Yuan Hongwen took a deep look at Zhuowen, and a black hole appeared beside him. He then disappeared into the black hole, and Yuan Hongwen's figure appeared above the central divine palace in the sky. Zhuan, come up. A gentle voice drifted over. A vast plateau appeared above Zhuowen. Shiji smiled at Zhuowen from the top of the divine mausoleum. Zhuowen nodded. He jumped up and landed beside Shiji on the palace. At the same time, the other 99 primal chaos war gods were sent to the teleportation continent by their respective elders. Zhuowen bowed to Bai Qing, Shui Hui, and Old Man Zhu Shang in the primal chaos divine temple. Then he looked at the teleportation continent above. It's a pity that we weren't chosen as primal chaos war gods. Otherwise, we could go to the primordial battlefield to broaden our horizons. Old Man Zhu Shang sighed. Shui Hui shook his head and smiled bitterly. Don't be delusional. Those who can become primal chaos war gods are at least mid-stage earthly immortals. The gap between us is huge. We can only wait for the Divine Master to open the passage to the primordial battlefield. Bai Qing was silent for a moment and said, My lords, I plan to return to the Green Lotus Mansion. Would you like to come with me? Shui Hui and Old Man Zhu Shang looked at each other and nodded. Then the 3 of them left the place. Senior Shiji, you seem to be hiding a lot of things from me. The primordial battlefield isn't in the heavenly armor continent, right? Zhuan looked at the teleportation continent for a while and suddenly turned his head to look at Shiji. Shiji glanced at Zhuan and sighed. Since we're about to head to the ancient battlefield, I won't hide it any longer. I wanted to tell you about this back then, but the Abyss Holy Dragon stopped me, so I didn't have to say it so soon. Now that the time is right, it should be fine, right? As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of black light flashed out from between Zhuowen's brows and transformed into the appearance of a little black dog. It glanced at Shiji before looking at Zhuowen and saying, Zhuowen, there are indeed some things that I asked Shiji to help conceal. You won't blame me, right? Zhuowen shook his head. He knew that Xiao He must have his own reasons for doing so. Now that the time is ripe, you should be able to tell me everything that happened 10,000 years ago, right? And isn't the primordial battlefield in the heavenly armor continent? Zhuowen asked in a low voice. Shiji nodded. Of course. When we enter the primordial battlefield this time, I will tell you even if you don't ask. After a pause, Shurji said in a low voice, "As for the primordial battlefield, it's indeed not in the heavenly armor continent. It's in the heavenly armor planet, which is even larger than the heavenly armor continent." Heavenly armor planet? Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. This was the first time he had heard of this term. He could not help but recall that Earth in his previous life was also a planet. The heavenly armor planet is much larger than the heavenly armor continent, and the two are related. In other words, the heavenly armor continent is a unique continent derived from the heavenly armor planet. This continent is the companion of the heavenly armor planet, and also a continent that surpasses the heavenly armor planet. On the heavenly armor planet, there are more humans than on the heavenly armor continent. However, these humans are all mortals without any martial arts aptitude. The warriors with martial arts aptitude are all on the heavenly armor continent. I can't explain this phenomenon. I can only attribute it to the uniqueness of the heavenly armor continent. Therefore, the humans born on the heavenly armor continent more or less have martial arts talent and have embarked on the path of martial arts. As for the existence of the heavenly armor continent, the mortals on the heavenly armor planet basically don't know about it. However, because the heavenly armor continent is the companion of the heavenly armor planet, the immortal Qi from 10,000 years ago and the Yuan Qi that has degenerated from the immortal Qi are all provided by the heavenly armor planet. Hearing this, Yuan felt as if countless thunderbolts were roaring in his head. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Shurji. In a low voice, he said, "Senior, are you saying that the primordial battlefield is on the heavenly armor planet?" At this moment, Zhuowen's emotions were extremely turbulent. He did not expect the heavenly armor continent to be the companion of the heavenly armor planet. At the same time, he recalled the middle-aged man who was flying on a sword when his consciousness entered Earth. The middle-aged man had once said that Earth was called the Huaxia continent. In other words, the middle-aged man was not talking about Earth, but the companion of Earth. Since the heavenly armor planet could give birth to a companion like the heavenly armor continent, it was probably the same for Earth. It could also give birth to a continent that was comparable to the Jade heavenly armor continent, and this continent was called the Huaxia continent. Planets and continents were equivalent to two extremes. Mortals lived on planets, while extraordinary people with cultivation talent lived on continents. The two went in opposite directions, but they complemented each other. Once, the ancestors of Earth had mentioned the saying that the sky was round and the Earth was round. This saying was probably not without basis. The sky was round and the Earth was probably the land of the planet's companion continent. At this moment, the understanding in Zhuowen's eyes intensified. If Zhuowen was a native of the heavenly armor continent, he might find it hard to accept. However, Zhuowen was not. He came from Earth in his previous life, and after some things happened when he comprehended the Tao, Zhuowen quickly accepted and agreed with Shurji's words. Zhuowen's expression naturally fell into Shurji's eyes. When he saw Zhuowen quickly calm down, a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. Yes, you're right. The ancient battlefield was indeed on the heavenly armor planet. The god from the starry sky's real target was the heavenly armor planet. The heavenly insect and the Luo Yenjing were released by the god to restrain the many ancient martial art practitioners on the heavenly armor continent, Shurji said in a low voice. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and continued, "Was the white-haired man swallowed by Tao Tai, the god who invaded the heavenly armor continent and the heavenly armor planet?" Shurji's eyes widened in shock. He could not help but blurt out, "You can actually see the white-haired man through the white light?" However, Shurji quickly calmed down. He sighed softly and said, "You're right. The white-haired man is the god from the starry sky. He calls himself God Gonga." Then why did he attack the heavenly armor continent and the heavenly armor planet? With God Gonga's strength and cultivation, he shouldn't have set his eyes on the heavenly armor continent, right? Zhuowen asked in confusion. Shurji looked embarrassed. He said, "Actually, I'm not too sure about this either. However, God Gonga's target is the heavenly armor planet. There must be something on the heavenly armor planet that's worth his attention, right?" As soon as Shurji finished speaking, a message suddenly rang out in Shurji and Zhuowen's minds. Gonga's target is to refine the heavenly armor planet and use it to help his son break through to God. The two of you have to be careful when you enter the heavenly armor planet. Gonga's son is hidden on the heavenly armor planet and the heavenly armor continent. The Lord of the Divine Tomb. Yun was taken aback. Soon after, his eyes filled with respect. The Lord of the Divine Tomb was an expert who had truly faced Gonga 10,000 years ago. He must know more than them. Shiji scratched his head and said to the Lord of the Divine Tomb, "You tell me. Although I know a lot, I don't know as much as you do. Plus, I can't say for sure." Zhuan also looked at the mausoleum in front of him expectantly. After all, Shiji had been swallowed by the smoke whale very early on and did not participate in the final battle. He could only glean some of the truth from a few words. He definitely could not compare to the Lord of the Divine Tomb. The Lord of the Divine Tomb fell silent for a moment. Suddenly, a black sphere flew out of the mausoleum. If you really want to know, send your consciousness into this black sphere. Everything you want to know is inside, the Lord of the Divine Tomb said in a deep voice. Zhuan took the black sphere and cupped his fists towards the mausoleum. Soon after, he chose a quiet corner and began to slowly send his consciousness into the black sphere. Zhuan saw a vast starry sky. Under the starry sky, there was a huge planet. Most of the planet was covered in green forests, and a small part of it was blue oceans. The planet was full of vitality. There were many mortals on it, as well as a variety of exotic beasts and trees. It was a prosperous scene. Is this the heavenly armor planet? Zhuan suddenly understood. Soon, he noticed that not far from the heavenly armor planet, there was a continent that was about 1/10 the size of the heavenly armor planet. The scenery on this continent was extremely rich. What surprised Zhuan even more was that the continent was filled with immortal qi. From time to time, countless rainbows would sweep out from it. They should be the cultivators living on the continent. Moreover, the surface of the continent flickered with an extremely powerful light of restriction. With Zhuan's experience of the devouring curse restriction, he could see that the restriction on the surface of the continent was used for concealment. It was because of these restrictions that the mortals on the heavenly armor planet could not see this extremely conspicuous behemoth. Zhuan also discovered that this continent was connected to the heavenly armor planet by an extremely thin white line. Looking carefully, Zhuan discovered that the long white line was actually an extremely rich immortal qi. This immortal qi came from the deepest part of the heavenly armor planet. Strangely, this immortal qi was derived from the bottom of the heavenly armor planet. It did not spread to the surface of the heavenly armor planet. Instead, it surged towards the heavenly armor continent, as if it was following some unknown law. A crack opened in the starry sky far away from the heavenly armor planet. A middle-aged man with fluttering white hair scurried out of the crack in a rather sorry state. The moment this person scurried out, he immediately sealed the crack. Then, with a gloomy expression, he said, "Damn it, Heavenly Circuit Sect, you're really ruthless. I'm clearly your official disciple, but just because I looked at the sect master's daughter and said something wrong, you actually banished me to the outer realm." Chapter 1817. Heavenly Armor Planet. Aren't all the planets in the extraterritorial galaxy abandoned? How can there be a planet that is so full of life? The white-haired man stared at Heavenly Armor Planet. His eyes were filled with curiosity. There's definitely something strange about this planet. I've never heard of or seen a planet that can survive in the extraterritorial galaxy. As he spoke, the white-haired man swept toward Heavenly Armor Continent like a ghost. The white-haired man did not enter Heavenly Armor Continent openly at first. Instead, he hid his aura and blended into Heavenly Armor Continent. After investigating for a while, he was pleasantly surprised to find that there were no heavenly gods on the planet. The strongest was only a demigod. This planet is really backward. There are no heavenly gods. In other words, this planet is ownerless. The white-haired man was extremely excited. He continued, "Since it's ownerless, I'll take out the star core of this planet. Unfortunately, I've already refined my home planet as my main planet. I can't refine other planets. I can only give this planet to my son to refine." This planet is full of life even in the harsh environment of the extraterritorial galaxy. It's definitely not simple. After refining it, I'll study it slowly. However, although there are no heavenly gods on this continent, there are too many saints. If I fight alone, I'm afraid it'll be difficult. I have to restrain these saints first. Next, the white-haired man secretly released Heavenly Insect and caused a great catastrophe on Heavenly Armor Continent. Heavenly Insect was indeed difficult to deal with. Not only was its strength terrifying, but its reproduction ability was also strong. It had many clones and could not be killed. Heavenly Insect also attracted Zhan Bai, one of the 3 demigods on Heavenly Armor Continent. He completely stopped Heavenly Insect's attack. Then, the white-haired man released Luo Yenjing. For a moment, the entire Heavenly Armor Continent was caught off guard. The white-haired man took advantage of the time when Heavenly Insect and Luo Yenjing were causing trouble on Heavenly Armor Continent to sneak into Heavenly Armor Planet. He wanted to forcibly extract the star core inside Heavenly Armor Planet. In the image of the black ball, Yuan saw the white-haired man use a powerful force to form a giant hand that could almost pass through the entire Heavenly Armor Planet. Then, the hand suddenly reached deep into the ground of Heavenly Armor Planet. However, not long after the white-haired man reached deep into Heavenly Armor Planet, his face suddenly changed. A strange force spread from the depths of Heavenly Armor Planet. Then, the white-haired man was shocked. And he spat a mouthful of blood. His giant hand. What force is this? What is inside Heavenly Armor Planet? Heavenly Armor of Heavenly Armor Planet, have Heavenly Armor, of Heavenly Armor Planet. The Hevoff armor of Heavenly Armor Planet was of Heavenly Armor God of Heaven of Hevoff Earth Planet with Heavenly Earth Planet with of God. At the end of the image, Songjie and the 2 demigods joined forces with countless sages of the Heavenly Armor Continent and all the divine chi of Heavenly Armor Planet to fight the white-haired man. Zhuan looked at the fallen sages. Many of them were celestial immortals and genuine immortals. In order to protect Heavenly Armor Planet, they all chose to self-detonate to help Songjie, Chao Yu and Zhan Bai defeat the white-haired man. Even Chao Yu and Zhan Bai, the 2 demigods, detonated their own primordial spirits, which finally worsened the white-haired man's injuries. In the end, he was torn apart by Songjie with his lifetime strength. Songjie set up 6 perilous places on Heavenly Armor Continent to store Songjie's 6 body parts. At this point, the image stopped abruptly. After the white-haired man was sealed, no one knew where Songjie went. However, one could see that Songjie in the image was at the end of his rope. When Zhuowen regained his senses from the projection, his heart was beating rapidly. He still could not forget the images of the saints who had self-destructed. They were all brave hearts who were willing to give up their lives to protect their hometowns. Because of that war, countless mortals on Heavenly Armor Planet were killed or injured. Most of the creatures were annihilated. The entire Heavenly Armor Planet was completely abandoned. The divine chi provided by Heavenly Armor Planet also degenerated into pneuma. Many sages died. That war was too tragic. In order to seal Ganj, Lord Songjie even destroyed the passage between Heavenly Armor Planet and Heavenly Armor Continent. This is why warriors on Heavenly Armor Continent can't go to Heavenly Armor Planet and why many warriors don't even know about Heavenly Armor Planet. The voice of the Master of the Tomb of God faintly sounded in Zhuowen's mind. His tone was full of sighs. So your purpose of opening up the antiquity battlefield is to find Songjie? Zhuowen asked, his eyes flashing. The Master of the Tomb of God said in a deep voice, "Yes, God Ganj is too horrible. Although he was torn apart by 5 horses, he didn't die at all. Moreover, we can't kill Ganj with our ability. Only gods of heaven can kill gods of heaven." Lord Songjie was the existence closest to gods of heaven in those days. If we can find him and let him refine Heavenly Armor Planet to become a god of heaven, then we can completely eliminate God Ganj, who is a threat in the future. Suddenly, Zhuowen remembered the image in the black ball. He remembered that there were only 3 demigods on Heavenly Armor Continent. They were Songjie, Chao Yu, and Zhan Bai. Chao Yu and Zhan Bai self-detonated and died in that war. Sangjia's whereabouts were unknown in the antiquity battlefield. Then who was the master of the Tomb of God? Zhuan heard from Do Hua, the master of the Temple of Chaos, that the master of the Tomb of God was also a demigod who had survived 10,000 years ago. However, there were only 3 demigods at that time. It was impossible for there to be a 4th demigod. Zhuowen didn't voice his suspicions. Instead, he remained silent. The Lord of the Divine Tomb was too powerful. He wasn't an existence that Zhuowen could contend against. Even if he found something suspicious, he couldn't voice it out. Otherwise, who knew what the Lord of the Divine Tomb would do? Zhuowen couldn't see through the master of the Tomb of God in front of him. Moreover, he couldn't completely believe the words of the master of the Tomb of God. Therefore, Zhuowen kept a certain amount of vigilance against the master of the Tomb of God. Zhuowen, you may be confused now. 2 of the 3 demigods back then have been sacrificed, and Lord Sangjia's whereabouts are unknown. My identity has become the biggest doubt, right? The voice of the master of the Tomb of God sounded in Zhuowen's mind again. Zhuowen's pupils shrank to the extreme. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. He stared at the tomb in front of him with vigilance. Little guy, you don't have to be so nervous. To tell you the truth, I was already at the peak of the true immortal 10,000 years ago. Although I was buried in the Nether Corpse impasse because of my serious injuries, I once witnessed the war between the gods and had a great understanding of the divine transformation realm. Later on, I became a demigod in the Nether Corpse impasse and controlled the entire place. Zhuowen nodded. His eyes showed that he understood. He was more interested in the identity of the master of the Tomb of God. However, he knew that the master of the Tomb of God didn't intend to reveal his identity, so he didn't ask. At this moment, the plateau where the Tomb of God was located also landed on the continent shrouded in white light. Then, several long rainbows landed on the continent. Furthermore, after landing on the continent, Zhuowen discovered that the mark that had fallen into his palm from the ancient boulders suddenly lit up. After that, he felt his entire body become incomparably cool. Clearly, this mark was the pass to enter this continent. Without this mark, he was afraid that he would immediately be attacked by the white light. Everyone is here. Let's set sail. Do Hua looked around. After confirming that there were no loopholes, he pointed at the void with his right hand. Suddenly, this strange continent leaped into the starry sky. Its speed was so fast that many warriors were stunned. Zhuowen looked at the heavenly armor continent below him that was getting farther and farther away and the starry sky that was getting closer and closer. His eyes suddenly showed a trace of yearning. If he could also travel through this vast starry sky, what kind of experience would it be? At this moment, countless people in the central region and the 4 continents noticed the continent that was leaping into the starry sky. Most people's eyes were filled with yearning and envy. After the continent left the heavenly armor continent, Yun found that the white light around the continent suddenly condensed into a white circular cover above the continent. In the starry sky, warriors below the divine transformation realm can't survive for long. Even demigods can't survive for long. Without this star god power, all the warriors on this continent would die, Shiji said with a sigh. Zhuowen nodded. No wonder Do Hua and the others wanted to reassemble the halberd. Their purpose was to extract the star god power from it and use it to travel through the starry sky. After leaping into the starry sky, the continent suddenly circled behind the heavenly armor continent. Its speed was extremely fast. Below the heavenly armor continent, a planet floated quietly. The moment he saw this planet, Zhuowen sucked in a breath of cold air. He wasn't the only one. Everyone else had similar expressions. This planet was pitch black and lifeless. It was like a metal ball. What was more terrifying was that there were countless cracks on the surface of this planet. It was as if this planet could shatter at any time. Zhuowen thought of the heavenly armor planet that he saw from the black sphere. Then he looked at the heavenly armor planet now. Even though he didn't see the countless scenes of the battle, he could imagine how tragic the battle was. This planet is called the heavenly armor planet, which is the ancient battlefield. This ancient battlefield has been completely sealed by Sangjia. We can't get close to it at all. We can only teleport in through the star god power on this continent. However, the teleportation is random. Everyone, take care. Do Hua glanced at the people around him coldly. Then, a white light swept over from above and instantly enveloped Do Hua. Then, Do Hua disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. At the same time, more and more white lights swept over from above. Any warrior who was enveloped by the white light mysteriously disappeared into thin air. The moment one of the white lights enveloped Chun, Yun felt an unimaginable feeling surge over him. It was as if the stars had changed and the whole world had been turned upside down. After Zhuan disappeared, Shiji looked at the tomb in front of him. He sighed and said, "Why did you hide your identity? If you had told Zhuan earlier, perhaps it wouldn't have been so troublesome." Chapter 18:18. Take me there. Shiji nodded and said with a complicated look in his eyes, Do Hua is so active in opening up the primordial battlefield because he wants to explore the thing inside the heavenly armor planet, right? The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum was silent for a moment before he said in a deep voice, "That is indeed the case. Do Hua is very smart. He has kept the 4 lords of the battlefield and the ancestor of the Holy Rune clan by his side. His purpose is to guard against us. Sometimes, the unknown is the greatest temptation. In the depths of the heavenly armor planet, there is a power that can make heavenly gods fear and even injure them. Do Hua will not let go of the opportunity to explore that place. The 4 lords of the battlefield and the patriarch of the Saint Rune clan will also be tempted." Shiji frowned slightly and said, "They're only working together on the surface. Who knows if they're secretly scheming against each other? Whether they are scheming against each other or not, we are their biggest opponents. Once we meet, they will immediately join forces to deal with us," the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum said indifferently. Shiji was silent for a moment before he said, "What about Jun? Should we tell him the purpose of entering the heavenly armor planet?" "No need. Jun is too weak. It is dangerous to enter that place. The 99 primal chaos war gods are just a cover for the primal chaos temple to the outside world." Do Hua gave everyone a reason to open up the primordial battlefield. "If I am not wrong, those juniors who are titled as primal chaos war gods will not be allowed to enter that place. They will be randomly teleported to various parts of the heavenly armor planet." The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum's indifferent voice sounded. Shiji nodded. The 2 of them already knew about Do Hua's purpose. They did not stop Do Hua because their purpose was the same as his. Do Hua wanted to explore the unknown power in the depths of the heavenly armor planet, while the Lord of the Divine Mausoleum and Shiji wanted to find Songjie in the depths of the earth. Back then, Songjie had mysteriously disappeared in the heavenly armor planet after sealing Divine God Ji. His whereabouts were unknown. The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum and Shiji both suspected that Songjie might still be alive and might be in the depths of the heavenly armor planet. So they had to enter the former primordial battlefield. At this moment, countless white lights flickered on the teleportation continent. Apart from the area where the Lord of the Divine Tomb was, everyone else, including Zhuan, had completely disappeared in the white light. "It's our turn now. This is the jade slip left behind by Lord Songjie in the Chaos Temple. The jade slip contains the exact location of that place. This is the reward that Do Hua gave us for helping to open up the ancient battlefield. I've already made a copy in advance. Take this one. See you here then." Shiji waved his right hand, and the jade slip flew towards the mausoleum. Instantly, a pitch-black hand reached out from the mausoleum and caught the jade slip and put it into the mausoleum. As the white light swept over, Shiji's entire body disappeared within the white light. "Dongfang, Nangong, Beichen, Shimen, we should also go." The Lord of the Divine Mausoleum was silent for a moment. The huge mausoleum suddenly shook, and then countless cracks appeared around the mausoleum. Blue lines of light emerged from these cracks. The moment the blue lines of light appeared, the entire mausoleum disintegrated into countless pieces of gravel. Then these pieces of gravel began to gather together, and finally formed an armored golem that was hundreds of feet tall. In front of the armored golem's forehead was a coffin. The coffin looked ordinary and was made of solid wood. However, the aura that emanated from the coffin had a terrifying power that could shake the heavens and earth and swallow the sun and the moon. After the armored golem was formed, the tombs of the true immortals surged. 4 bronze coffins flew out and entered the bodies of the tomb guards in front of the tombs. 5 white lights flashed and enveloped the 5 of them. Then, the 5 of them completely disappeared from the teleportation continent. At the same time, in the sacrificial tower of the prophet's family in the Central Plains, a petite lowly-like figure slowly walked out of the sacrificial tower. She raised her head and looked at the sky of the heavenly armor continent with a clear look in her eyes. The passageway to the heavenly armor planet was destroyed by Tsongjie 10,000 years ago, and the entire place has been sealed. Even though the heavenly armor continent is the companion of the heavenly armor planet, it's still difficult to find the exact location of the heavenly armor planet. A cold voice slowly came from behind Yen Tianwei. Then, a slender figure wearing a ghost mask walked out of the sacrificial tower and stopped beside Yen Tianwei. Yen Tianwei nodded and smiled. It's different now. Since Do Hua and the others have completely opened up the primordial battlefield in the heavenly armor planet, I can also deduce the exact location of the heavenly armor planet. But how do you plan to get there? Yen Tianwei looked at the man with the ghost mask very seriously. She knew very well that in order to get to the heavenly armor planet from the heavenly armor continent, they had to cross a certain distance of the starry sky. Neither Yen Tianwei nor the man with the ghost mask had the ability to cross the starry sky. Getting to the heavenly armor planet was the biggest problem at the moment. The man with the ghost mask chuckled. This is not a big problem. The Divine Master Do Hua is determined to get to the unknown thing in the depths of the heavenly armor planet, so he needs both of us. That's why he left a small fragment of the teleportation continent for us. As he spoke, the man with the ghost mask flicked his finger. A fragment of rock that was about a few miles long and surrounded by white light appeared in front of them. Yen Tianwei looked at the rock fragment with a complicated look in her eyes. She didn't expect the man with the devil face mask to have such a huge network. Even the Divine Master Do Hua had left behind a fragment for him to teleport to the mainland. Let's go too. This time, I will try my best to help you gather all the holy symbols. The prediction holy symbol, a part of the wind thunder holy symbol, and most of the ice fire holy symbol have fused together to produce the primordial origin. It's already slowly transforming your body, right? The man with the ghost mask said calmly. Speaking of this, excitement appeared in Yen Tianwei's eyes for the first time. She nodded and said, "You're right. The primordial origin is indeed extraordinary. It's actually beginning to transform my body. With the help of the primordial origin, I have the power of a heavenly saint. However, this is not enough." The man with the ghost mask chuckled and said, "Of course not. If you gather all 9 holy symbols, I can help you reach a higher realm. However, I need your ability to predict the future to help me enter the interior of the heavenly armor planet. Don't worry. When you gather all the other holy symbols, I will give you my revolving stab holy symbol and do my best to help you." Yen Tianwei was silent for a moment. She nodded and said, "Okay. Happy cooperation." As she spoke, Yen Tianwei jumped onto the fragment of the teleportation continent. The man with the ghost mask did not hesitate and stepped onto the fragment of the teleportation continent as well. Following that, the fragment silently broke through the air and left the heavenly armor continent in an instant. When Zhuan woke up from the state of the stars moving, he found that he had stepped into a barren land. There were dilapidated walls everywhere. There was a decaying desert, a dilapidated wilderness, and a sky filled with black fog. The scene was like the end of the world. It made one feel gloomy. At the same time, a black light shot out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows and turned into the appearance of Xiao He. Xiao He looked around at the dilapidated battlefield and sighed softly. "This is the primordial battlefield. I really miss it. Back then, if Master hadn't destroyed the passage to the heavenly armor continent and allowed me to leave this place in advance, I'm afraid I would have died completely. Not even a trace of my soul would have survived." Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He said to Xiao He in a deep voice, "Why did the Divine Master, do Hua, deliberately want to open up the primordial battlefield? Zhuan stared at Xiao He. He knew very well that Xiao He had hidden many things from him. It was not just Xiao He. Even the master of the divine tomb and Shiji had hidden many things from him. Although this kind of concealment was not out of malice, but because he was too weak and wanted to protect him, Zhuan did not like the feeling of being kept in the dark. Xiao He frowned slightly and sighed softly. The old monsters of the Central Plains did come to the primordial battlefield with ulterior motives. However, this is not something you can participate in. This is what the master of the divine tomb and Shiji wanted. After all, in that place, even existences like the master of the divine tomb and Shiji might not be able to protect themselves. If you go there, you'll just be throwing your life away. Zhuan frowned slightly. He recalled the scene of the white-haired man being injured by a strange force from the depths of the heavenly armor planet. He could not help but ask in a deep voice, "It has something to do with that force from the depths of the heavenly armor planet, right?" Xiao He's eyes were filled with surprise. He took a deep look at Zhuan before nodding in the end. However, he did not answer. "Take me there," Zhuan said with a determined gaze. Xiao He shook his head. "That place is too dangerous. I don't want you to take the risk. Moreover, I've heard of that place from the master before. It's an ominous place. Even true immortals might not be able to come out of there alive." The master of the divine tomb and Shiji went there mainly to find the master. Even they are not completely confident in being able to protect themselves, let alone you. Suddenly, a sonorous voice rang out in Zhuan and Xiao He's ears. "Let him go. I'll protect him." Afterwards, a middle-aged man in black robes with a hazy face slowly appeared before Zhuan and Xiao He. Zhuan stared at the black-robed man as his eyes narrowed. He could not help but murmur softly, "The first mountain god?" Xiao He stared coldly at the first mountain god and said, "Just who are you? I've been suspicious of you since the beginning because I've never heard of someone like you in the ancient times." Chapter 18-19. Entrance. The first mountain god looked at Xiao He indifferently and said, "That Song Long Taoist has been cultivating for such a long time. Do you know everything he has experienced in his life? When I was suppressed, I wasn't famous. Later on, I created the myriad Tao undying divine body in the third layer. How did you hear about this in the outside world?" Xiao He frowned and stared at the first mountain god. It wanted to see if the first mountain god was telling the truth, but it couldn't see anything. Speaking up to this point, the first mountain god looked at Zhuan and said, "Little guy, don't you want to know why Do Hua, the divine tomb master, and the rest of the powerhouses of the Central Plains came here? Don't you want to know what's hidden in the depths of the ancient battlefield? Also, where is Cangjie from back then? Even the owner of the Fushi cauldron, Fushi, might be found here." Zhuan was silent for a moment. He looked deeply at the first mountain god and said, "There's no free lunch in this world. What's your purpose in helping me?" "Don't worry, the Azure Dragon Hall is still suppressing me. As long as the Azure Dragon Hall is here, I will never do anything to you. I'm just very curious about the things in the depths of the ancient battlefield. What exactly is there in the depths? Don't you want to know?" The first mountain god said patiently. "It's that simple?" Zhuan said coldly. The first mountain god smiled and said, "It's that simple. Of course, if you're not interested in the depths of the ancient battlefield, then pretend I didn't say anything. The choice is yours." Zhuan was silent for a moment. Then he looked at Xiao He and said seriously, "Xiao He, take us there." Xiao He looked deeply at Zhuan. It could see the determination and stubbornness in Zhuan's eyes. It sighed and said, "Can you tell me why you insist on going?" "A power that even gods fear. This power surpasses my imagination. Perhaps this power can help save Chen Shui," Zhuan said with a wild look in his eyes. After learning that even the Saint Master Gugu was not confident that he could save Mu Chen Shui, Zhuan's heart was almost dead, but he did not give up. Although he did not know what kind of power existed within the heavenly armor planet, he knew that this power was something that even gods feared. Perhaps he could find a way to save Mu Chen Shui from this power. Although this hope was extremely slim, Yuan firmly held onto it as if it was a life-saving straw. Even if he could not find the source of the powerful force, it would be a hope if he could find Songjie, the former #1 man in the heavenly armor continent. After all, Songjie was much more powerful than Zhuowen in terms of strength and knowledge. Maybe Songjie knew something that could balance yin and yang. It was with this kind of hope that Zhuowen did not hesitate to head to the entrance deep underground. With the protection of the first mountain god, he would undoubtedly have an extra layer of protection. Xiao He was silent. It looked deeply at Zhuowen and finally nodded. It was very clear about Zhuowen's character. Once he decided on something, even 10 bulls could not pull him back. Xiao He opened its mouth and spat out a jade slip. It said, "Back then, Shiji and Dou Hua made a deal. After opening the ancient battlefield, Shiji obtained the location to the depths of the heavenly armor planet from Dou Hua. I asked Shiji for a copy before." Zhuowen took the jade slip and hesitated for a while. He said, "Xiao He, since you asked Shiji for a copy of the jade slip, you should be planning to go, right?" Xiao He nodded, but it was rare for it to be silent. Zhuowen sighed softly. After spending so many years with Xiao He, he naturally understood Xiao He. After all, Songjie was Xiao He's master. It was more eager to enter the depths of the heavenly armor planet than Zhuowen. However, the reason why Xiao He did not say anything was probably because it was worried about Zhuowen's safety. After checking the jade slip, Zhuowen had a rough idea of the general direction of this place. "I know where the location is. Follow me." With that, Zhuowen stamped his right foot. Like a burst of green smoke, he instantly disappeared. Xiao He turned into a black light and entered Zhuowen's knowledge sea. The first mountain god leisurely followed behind Zhuowen. This was a decaying and cracked land. In the center of this land, there was a huge lake. The lake was so large that it seemed to be boundless. Strangely, the water in the lake was not clear blue, but as black as ink. Moreover, it emitted an unpleasant stench. But suddenly, the black water splashed violently. In the splashing water, an unknown huge tail appeared. Then, it dived into the black water and disappeared without a trace. Obviously, some unknown creatures were hiding in the lake. It was a dangerous place. A long streak of light shot over. Upon closer inspection, one could see that there was actually a huge beast within this long streak of light. On the back of this huge beast, there was a magnificent palace. In the hall stood 3 figures. They were the divine masters of the chaotic temple, Dou Hua, Elder Gu, and Yuan Hongwen. Tao Tai landed on the shore of the lake. Elder Gu stared at the lake filled with black water and frowned. "Divine Master, the entrance to the depths of the earth is this lake? Didn't the ancient books say that the entrance is a huge cave? That cave was blasted out by the divine masters in the past." Dou Hua's eyes flickered and he said in a deep voice, "If the records in the temple are correct, this is the entrance. After all, 10,000 years have passed. It is possible that the entrance has changed." Then, Dou Hua looked at Yuan Hongwen and said, "Hongwen, this place is filled with danger. When the time comes, you should enter the central divine palace. If the other chaotic war gods come, try your best to stop them from the shore. After all, the entrance is not something they can enter." Yuan Hongwen nodded and said, "Don't worry, Divine Master. Moreover, this place is so remote. If they don't know the location, they won't be able to find this place. There is no need to worry. Moreover, the chaotic war gods are just a group of juniors. They will only be courting death if they enter." Dou Hua nodded and said, "Now, let's wait for the others." After a short while, another 4 long rainbows flew over. The 4 long rainbows withdrew their brilliance and revealed 4 figures with grand auras. The 4 of them were the masters of the 4 battlefields. "Divine Master." The masters of the 4 battlefields cupped their fists at Dou Hua. Then, they landed near Dou Hua and stared at the black lake in front of them solemnly. At their level of cultivation, they could naturally see how extraordinary and terrifying the black lake was. Not long after the masters of the 4 battlefields arrived, another dozen long rainbows flew over. These dozen figures cupped their fists at Dou Hua and landed on the shore of the black lake not far away. These dozen figures were all heavenly immortal patriarchs of the Central Plains. Among them were He Wushang of the Royal Blade Clan, Wei Wuyin of the Beast Envoy Clan, Dong Fangxin of the Heavy Shield Clan, Kong Lianshuan of the Blood Sacrifice Clan, and Ji Wubing of the Eternity Clan. This is the entrance to the depths of the heavenly armor planet? He Wushang murmured in a low voice with excitement in his eyes. Not only He Wushang, but the other heavenly immortal patriarchs also had various expressions of excitement. They had seen the jade slip given by Do Hua, and knew that the depths of the underground hid a power that even heavenly immortals feared. Although they didn't know what the power was, there was no doubt that there was a supreme treasure hidden under the heavenly armor planet. Even though the strength of these heavenly immortal patriarchs was much weaker than Do Hua and the other true immortals, obtaining treasures didn't only rely on strength, it was more importantly fortuitous encounters. So, these heavenly immortal patriarchs held hope in their hearts. They knew that if they were able to find out the reason for the depths of the underground, then they might have a chance to obtain that power. The path of the martial Tao was a path of life and death. If one couldn't constantly improve, then it was actually equivalent to waiting for death. These heavenly immortal patriarchs had cultivated for a very long time, so being able to break through in their cultivation was much more important than their lives. Swoosh! Another long rainbow flew over, revealing a bald monk with a burly figure. This person was none other than Shiji. Brother Shi, where's the master of the divine tomb? Do Hua laughed heartily. He's here. Shiji stood in midair and said, swoosh. Swoosh, swoosh. As soon as Shiji finished speaking, 5 silhouettes swiftly flashed over from the horizon behind him. They were extremely swift and instantly descended on the shore of the lake. Everyone looked over in succession and revealed astounded expressions. Because the 5 silhouettes that appeared before them were actually 5 enormous stone statues that were over 1 kilometer tall. The surface of the stone statue in the lead was densely covered in countless blue rays of light, and there was an ordinary coffin embedded in its forehead. But it was precisely this ordinary coffin that emitted an aura that caused the hearts of countless people present to tremble. Moreover, behind this enormous stone statue stood 4 slightly smaller stone statues, and each of these 4 small stone statues had a coffin embedded in them as well. Even though their auras couldn't compare to the enormous stone statue, it still caused the hearts of many heavenly immortal patriarchs to tremble. 4 true immortals. A heavenly immortal patriarch gulped down a mouthful of saliva and spoke with a trembling voice. Do Hua glanced at the 5 stone statues with a fearful gaze, yet he said with a smile, "Welcome, Master of the Divine Tomb. I presume those 4 are your tomb guardian true immortals. I've heard of them since a long time ago, yet I've never seen them. Now that I've seen them today, they deserve their reputation. This black lake is the entrance that leads to the mysterious underground?" The Master of the Divine Tomb paid no attention to Do Hua's courteous words, and he went straight to the point and spoke indifferently. Do Hua smiled lightly and said, "All those years ago, God Gonggu intended to extract the star core of Heavenly Armor Star, so he used his extraordinary strength to forcefully pierce through this place. However, he encountered the obstruction of a mysterious force at the depths of this place and was injured by this force. Since then, that place has formed a cave that goes straight underground. According to the geographical location recorded in the ancient books, that cave is here." Chapter 1820. Strange humanoid, the Lord of the Divine Tomb fell silent for a moment. Then his vast consciousness spread out and entered the Black Lake. Ooh. The moment his consciousness entered the Black Lake, the entire lake began to roil violently, and the ferocious roars of ferocious beasts could be heard from within. Umph! The Lord of the Divine Tomb snorted coldly, and an extremely terrifying pressure surged out from his consciousness. As soon as this pressure appeared, the roars in the Black Lake were immediately extinguished. After the roars were extinguished, the Lord of the Divine Tomb withdrew his consciousness. He looked at Do Hua and said in a deep voice, "This lake is very deep. I've already probed several thousand meters down, but I still haven't reached the bottom. Moreover, there are many ferocious beasts of all shapes and sizes. These ferocious beasts aren't simple. Do Hua nodded and said in a deep voice, I've probed before as well. There's a fishy smell in the Black Lake. It's very similar to the smell of blood, but it's very faint. If you don't investigate carefully, you won't be able to detect it at all. If this really is the entrance, I'm afraid it won't be that easy to enter. When the time comes, we'll need everyone to work together. Do Hua cupped his hands at everyone when he spoke up to hear. The others naturally didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly acknowledged. Shiji, let's go in. The Lord of the Divine Tomb said indifferently. He took a step forward and suddenly leapt into the Black Lake, causing countless black splashes. The four true immortals behind him and Shiji didn't hesitate to follow the Lord of the Divine Tomb. Soon, they disappeared into the Black Lake. Do Hua watched the Lord of the Divine Tomb's group enter the Black Lake without even saying goodbye. His eyes slowly narrowed as a cold light flashed through them. Godlord, the Lord of the Divine Tomb's group is really looking down on us, right? The Lord of the Divine Tomb and the four true immortals are only on the verge of death. They don't have much lifespan left, so it's impossible for them to use their power at will. On the other hand, the number of true immortals we have isn't any less than theirs. Moreover, there's more than 10 heavenly immortals. If we really fight, they might not be our match, yet they're actually so impudent in front of us, Elder Gu said with some indignation. It wasn't just Elder Gu, the expressions of the four true immortals and the others were unsightly as well. If they weren't afraid of the Lord of the Divine Tomb, then why would they be so courteous to them? Don't mention it. The Master of the Divine Tomb isn't simple. He's not someone we can afford to offend. Let's go in as well. However, everyone must be careful. This Black Lake is filled with danger. We can't let our guard down. Immortals, immortals, and immortals. Immortals and immortals of the immortals and immortals and immortals. Yuan Hongwen nodded. He knew his own limitations. Even though his natural talent was strong, there was still a huge gap between him and the heavenly immortal experts of the older generation, let alone true immortal experts like Do Hua and the four lords of the battlefield. The to you, be to him. To the immortal of the I of the immortal of the immortals, immortal. Do Hua instructed a few more times before he flicked his sleeve, and he transformed into a ray of light that leaped into the Black Lake. On the other hand, Elder Gu, the four lords of the battlefield, and over 10 heavenly immortal realm experts followed closely behind him. Soon, only Yuan Hongwen and the immortal of the immortals were left. Yuan Hongwen looked at the Black Lake silently. There was a trace of yearning in his eyes, but he had to obey Do Hua's orders. Big guy, it looks like we can only rely on each other here. I wonder when the Divine Lord and the others will come out. Yuan Hongwen smiled bitterly. He leaped into the immortal of the immortal of the immortals and immortals. He sat down cross-legged and started cultivating. When the Lord of the Divine Tomb, Do Hua, and the others entered the Black Lake, a black figure flashed over like a bolt of lightning from a crumbling and cracked land far away from the Black Lake. In a desert, Zhuowen suddenly stopped in his tracks. His ears twitched slightly as he heard the faint sounds of battle as well as the sound of delicate shouts. Zhuowen frowned and looked around. He immediately noticed that there were slight ripples spreading out from the bottom of the desert. Restriction. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He flew to the bottom of the desert and pointed at the devouring curse. Runes spread out and enveloped the ripples at the bottom of the desert. The restriction wasn't very strong. Zhuowen only took 10 breaths to destroy it. Then, he found that there was a cave inside the restriction. In this cave, the sounds of fighting were getting more and more intense. The sounds were rolling like thunder. Boy, are you going to go in? Xiao Hei's voice sounded in Zhuowen's mind. Let's go in and have a look. The underground of the heavenly armor star is definitely not simple. Even if the immortals go in, I'm afraid they won't find anything so quickly. Since there is a restriction here, I'm afraid there must be something good hidden inside. Zhuowen's eyes were as bright as the moon. Since he found the restriction here, Zhuowen naturally wouldn't ignore it. He had to go in and check it out. As for the danger, Zhuowen wasn't too worried. After all, the first mountain god had agreed to help him. In his opinion, The danger of the primordial battlefield had been reduced to the minimum. Thinking of this, Zhuan took a step forward and entered the cave. As he got closer to the depths of the cave, the sound of battle became more intense. Zhuan found the occasional shouts to be familiar. In the depths of the cave was a large natural cave. There were sharp stalactites at the top of the cave. Below them, a beautiful figure was surrounded by blooming white lotuses. She was in a constant battle with a huge black shadow. Zhuan immediately recognized the beautiful figure and muttered in a low voice, "Ji Chenyan." The woman in front of him was indeed Ji Chenyan of the Eternal Family. Ji Chenyan was fighting with a strange humanoid figure that was several feet tall. This strange humanoid figure had a crooked back. There were 3 heads embedded on its back. Each of the heads was in extreme pain. The strange humanoid figure roared. One of the heads on its back exploded into a pool of blood. Then, the strength of this strange humanoid figure increased by several folds. The originally evenly matched battle immediately became one-sided. Puchi. Ji Chenyan's face was deathly pale as she spat out a mouthful of blood. The countless white lotuses in front of her exploded one after another. The strange human figure's right hand reached out and smashed towards Ji Chenyan's chest. This punch was terrifying. Even Zhuan felt that it was hard to resist. With Ji Chenyan's current state, if she was hit by this punch, she would definitely be severely injured. Zhuan's eyes flickered. He sighed and took out the Fushi cauldron. His right hand pointed at the Fushi cauldron. Instantly, an extremely terrifying pressure burst out from the cauldron. This pressure was so terrifying that it turned into an invisible mountain in the void. The invisible mountain came crashing down and pressed heavily on the strange humanoid figure. The punch that the strange humanoid figure threw out was stopped. Ji Chenyan took advantage of the moment when the strange humanoid figure stopped. She stomped her foot and immediately escaped the attack range of the strange humanoid figure. Then, she retreated to Zhuan's side. "Young Master Zhua, thank you for saving me." Ji Chenyan's beautiful eyes were filled with gratitude. She cupped her fists and thanked him. Zhuan nodded and said, "What the hell is this? And why did Miss Ji enter this seal?" Zhuan looked at Ji Chenyan. When he was breaking the seal, he found that the seal outside was intact. In other words, Ji Chenyan didn't break the seal. It was as if she entered the seal out of thin air. Ji Chenyan's beautiful face revealed a trace of bitterness. She said, "When I was transported to the primordial battlefield, I appeared here the moment I opened my eyes. Then I encountered this strange humanoid figure. Young Master Zhua, be careful. This strange humanoid figure is very strong." Roar. At this moment, the strange humanoid figure tilted its head and stared at Zhuan with red eyes. It roared furiously at him. Clearly, the pressure from before made it very uncomfortable. Bang! One of the heads on the back of the strange humanoid figure exploded into a cloud of blood mist. Then, its strength skyrocketed. It stomped its right foot and charged toward Zhuan. Zhuan's eyes were indifferent. He pointed at the void with his right hand and said in a deep voice, "First Mountain God, in order not to waste time, I'll have to trouble you." After Zhuan finished speaking, a black shadow stepped out from behind Zhuan. The First Mountain God looked deeply at Zhuan, then took a step forward and swept towards the strange humanoid figure. Boom! The First Mountain God threw out a punch. It was an ordinary punch, but when Ji Chenyan saw it, she fell into a momentary trance. Her beautiful eyes couldn't help but be filled with fear. The strange humanoid figure's eyes flashed fiercely. It roared and pounced forward. It stretched out its claws and met the First Mountain God's punch. Unfortunately, when the strange humanoid figure came into contact with the First Mountain God's punch, it was frozen by an invisible force. Then, it could only watch as the First Mountain God's punch landed on its chest. Bang! 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 The strange humanoid figure didn't even have time to react before it was beaten into a cloud of blood mist. It couldn't be more dead. This, Ji Chenyan stared blankly at the scene. She didn't even have time to react. The strange humanoid figure that almost killed her was cleanly killed by a single punch. Who is this person? He's so terrifying. And it seems like he listens to Zhuowen's orders? After regaining her senses, Ji Chunyan first looked at the first mountain god. Then she looked at the tall and straight figure in front of her. Her beautiful eyes were filled with complicated emotions. She knew that the young man in front of her had too many secrets. He must have been holding back during the divine battle. After all, if he had summoned such an expert, Yuan Hongwen would have been defeated in one move. After killing the strange humanoid figure, the first mountain god said indifferently, "Hurry to your destination. Don't waste too much time here." Chapter 1821. Says Black Ball, "Mr. Zhua, that person was..." Ji Chunyan came back to her senses and asked in shock. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He didn't answer Ji Chunyan's question directly. Instead, he looked around and said, "Since there is a restriction here, there must be something valuable inside. Let's search." As he spoke, Yuan walked into the depths of the cave. Ji Chunyan's eyes flickered. She was very smart. Since Yuan changed the topic, she naturally had no reason to ask. Instead, she quietly followed behind Zhuan. After entering the depths of the cave, Zhuan found that there was a small pool of water that was about 10 meters wide at the end of the cave. The strange thing was that the water in the small pool was pitch black, and there was a strange smell of blood in the small pool. Smelling the stench of blood, Zhuowen furrowed his brows. He stared at the small pool in front of him. He realized that the stench of blood was very similar to the aura of the strange human figure that was killed by the first mountain god. That strange figure crawled out of the pool. As soon as it came out, it attacked me without any explanation. Ji Chunyan's eyes were filled with fear. Zhuan nodded. Then, his spirit ring suddenly vibrated. He heard the Blood Immortal's extremely excited divine thought. "Master, quickly let me out. I feel a very comfortable smell of blood. Quickly let me out." Hearing this, Zhuan flicked his finger and released the Blood Immortal. At this moment, the Blood Immortal was in a very difficult situation. In the previous battle with Yuan Hongwen, the Blood Immortal had suffered a lot. Since then, Yuan had kept his promise and completely removed the slave seal on the Blood Immortal, allowing her to regain her freedom. She was no longer bound by Zhuan. However, the Blood Immortal was very thick-skinned. Using the excuse of being heavily injured, she insisted that Zhuowen help her recover from her injuries before she planned to leave Zhuowen. In desperation, Zhuowen didn't refuse. Speaking of which, the reason why the Blood Immortal was in such a difficult situation was indeed related to him. The Blood Immortal was also used to calling him Master. Even without the slave seal, she still habitually called Zhuowen Master. As soon as the Blood Immortal came out, she jumped into the black pool and couldn't help but moan in pleasure. Zhuowen looked at the Blood Immortal and said, "You know this black pool?" The Blood Immortal swam a few times in the pool and grinned. "Master, can't you see that the black pool is made of blood? And my intuition tells me that the blood is not ordinary blood, but the blood of a saint." Saint's blood? Zhuowen had a strange look in his eyes. When he smelled the blood, he already had some guesses. However, the smell of blood in the black pool was extremely strange. It didn't smell like real blood at all, so he didn't think about it. "I'm afraid it was formed by the death of a saint during the war. And to be able to form such a small pool, I'm afraid it wasn't just one saint." The Blood Immortal said with some emotion. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He immediately said in a deep voice, "Let's go into the pool and have a look." The Blood Immortal nodded and immediately rushed into the depths of the pool. Zhuowen followed behind the Blood Immortal and went into the depths of the pool. Ji Chunyan's beautiful eyes flashed. She didn't follow, but stood on the shore and waited. This black pool gave him a sense of danger. Moreover, if she followed him down and Zhuowen discovered something good, it would be very awkward. Zhuowen squatted on the Blood Immortal. In this environment, the Blood Immortal's speed was much faster than his. The pool did not seem large, but its bottom was extremely deep. After descending to a depth of around a few hundred meters, Zhuowen discovered an undercurrent surging below. It was like a terrifying whirlwind had swept up, causing his expression to change slightly. "Mistress, look over there." The Blood Immortal suddenly pointed with her right hand. At the bottom of the pool, there were countless reefs. And among the reefs, there were several oval-shaped black balls. The black ball's surface was covered with purple veins, like the veins of a human body. And Juan found that the black balls were constantly wriggling. In the process of wriggling, countless black blood spurted out, as if it was replenishing the entire pool. Seeing this, Juan's pupils shrank. He didn't expect the black blood to emerge from the black balls. And there were many of these black balls at the bottom of the pool. There were at least a few hundred of them. But when Juan approached one of the black balls suddenly wriggled, and then a black and white eyeball appeared on top of it. The eyeball's pupils were like ink, and it stared straight at Juan. Then the countless black veins on the surface suddenly shot out and turned into long black lines, wrapping around Juan's entire body. Juan's pupils shrank. He stepped out with his right foot, and invisible ripples spread out. Then he disappeared from the spot, making the long black lines miss. When Juan reappeared, he was already out of the black ball's attack range. As for the blood immortal, she was naturally brought out by him. What are these things? Juan's eyes were extremely serious. Suddenly, a roar came from the black ball. Then the black ball closed its eyeball, and then it began to wriggle from the inside. A strange human figure separated from the black ball. This strange human figure was exactly the same as the strange human figure that was killed by the first mountain god. Following this roar, Juan noticed that the other hundreds of black balls around him were also roaring. Then each of them released a strange humanoid figure. The hundreds of strange human figures kept wriggling their bodies, and then they all roared and rushed toward Juan. They were as fast as lightning. Juan had no choice but to let the first mountain god out again. The first mountain god looked around at the strange human figures that were rushing toward him. His eyes were full of displeasure, and he was obviously very displeased that Juan was still here. However, he didn't say anything. Instead, he waved his right hand, and a black hole appeared behind him. One by one, stalwart figures walked out. There were a total of 17 figures. Juan recognized 3 of the 17 figures. They were the 18th mountain god, the 17th mountain god, and the 16th mountain god. Juan had a good relationship with these 3 mountain gods. The 3 of them looked at Juan and smiled generously. Juan smiled back at them. "Let's end this quickly." The first mountain god said calmly, and the other 17 mountain gods nodded. Then, they held onto their respective mountains and charged toward the strange humanoid figures in the surroundings. Juan also noticed that the first mountain god held the first mountain and formed a seal with his hands. Then, a surging dark golden light emerged. Juan's small perfection holy body was watered by the dark golden light, and his whole body was filled with surging power. It was as if he had endless strength. Obviously, the dark golden light greatly increased the power of the mountain gods who practiced the 10,000 Tao indestructible divine body. Juan roared, and the golden light burst out from his body. He also rushed toward one of the strange human figures around him. Bang, bang, bang. He punched the strange human figure 3 times in a row. The speed was extremely fast, and the golden light flickered. The strange human figure exploded into a mist of blood, and the several heads on its back also exploded into a mist of blood. With the existence of the first mountain god, it was not a problem for Juan to deal with hundreds of strange humanoid figures. When the last strange humanoid figure was destroyed by Juan's punch, his gaze fell on the hundreds of black balls below. His eyes were filled with seriousness. "This place is really strange." The first mountain god frowned and called the other mountain gods back to the Azure Dragon Palace. He then silently went to Juan's side. Juan said in a deep voice, "These hundreds of black balls are spewing out the blood of saints. I'm afraid the answer to all of this lies in these black balls. Let me see what's inside." The first mountain god nodded and walked toward one of the black balls. When the black ball sensed the first mountain god's approach, it roared, and countless veins rushed out again. Unfortunately, the first mountain god's body was too terrifying. The attacks from the veins were like tickles to him. The first mountain god's right hand formed into a claw and grabbed at the black orb. Then he tore it apart. The black orb screamed and was torn into countless pieces by the first mountain god, revealing the true appearance of the black orb. This is a saint? When Zhuowen's gaze fell on the black ball that was torn apart, he could not help but gasp. He saw a skinny middle-aged man lying quietly inside the black ball. The middle-aged man's eyes were dull, and his body was covered by countless black veins. Zhuowen could clearly sense that these veins were constantly absorbing the middle-aged man's blood. This person's cultivation should be around the level of a heavenly saint when he was alive. Unfortunately, he is now a living dead. He has become a living dead that provides blood for these black balls. How sad. The first mountain god murmured with a complicated gaze. Even Zhuowen felt a chill in his heart when he saw this scene. These black balls did not kill these saints. Instead, they were like captives. They kept these saints in the black balls, and after a period of time, they would absorb the blood of these saints. What are these things? Zhuowen took a deep breath and asked coldly. The first mountain god shook his head and said, "I've never seen these things before. Moreover, there are too many of them. If I'm not wrong, although the black water in the pool is blood, I think it's more of the dregs in the blood." After these black balls absorbed the blood of the saints, they probably absorbed the essence into the depths of the ground. The dregs are the black blood that formed the black pool. These saints have already fused with the black balls. It's impossible to separate them. Zhuowen frowned. The first mountain god's guess was not without reason, especially since he did not feel the surging saint aura of the saints in the black pool. The black blood was indeed the dregs of the saint's blood. If these black balls lead to the depths of the ground, then what is there in the depths of the ground? Zhuowen's eyes flashed. He then raised his right hand and pointed. Instantly, countless yellow spring water droplets gushed out and touched the black balls that the first mountain god had destroyed. Instantly, the yellow spring water droplets absorbed the terrifying power of the blood essence in the black balls. "Instead of living in pain, I'll send you on your way." While the yellow spring water droplets were absorbing the blood essence in the black balls, Zhuowen pointed his left hand between the saint's eyebrows and destroyed his mind. Chapter 1822. The Gate of Reincarnation, such dense essence energy. The moment Zhuowen sent the underworld water droplets into the black sphere, he felt an extremely dense essence energy, and his underworld water droplets increased by several folds. An increase of 10,000 underworld water droplets. Zhuowen's eyes flickered, revealing a look of ecstasy. There were several hundred black spheres here. If each of them could increase his underworld water droplets by 10,000, then wouldn't he be able to obtain several million underworld water droplets? This wasn't a small number. One must know that even the Qin Tian tribe within the Luo Yen whale, after such a long period of development, had only produced close to 1,000,000 underworld water droplets. Recently, Thuan also discovered that the underworld water droplets in the Qin Tian tribe had stopped increasing. He knew that something must have happened within the Luo Yen whale, or perhaps the illusion gods within the Luo Yen whale had all been hunted. "Senior First Mountain God, help me." Zhuowen looked at the first mountain god with a burning gaze. Slaughtering underworld finger? The first mountain god looked deeply at Zhuowen, then clenched his right hand into a fist and suddenly punched through the air. Suddenly, hundreds of terrifying fist shadows appeared, and these fist shadows flew towards the remaining black spheres at the bottom of the lake. These black balls were not very strong. Under the fist shadows of the first mountain god, they all exploded into dust. Meanwhile, Zhuowen divided his yellow spring water droplets into hundreds of droplets and plunged them into the hundreds of black balls. Absorb. Zhuowen immediately used the slaughtering underworld finger and began to continuously absorb the essence energy from these black spheres. Zhuowen jumped into the center of these several hundred black spheres, and soon after, yellow streams flowed into Zhuowen's body. 1,000,000, 2,000,000, 3,000,000. The number of underworld water droplets rapidly increased and soon reached the 10,000,000 mark. This made Zhuowen extremely happy, because the essence energy within these black spheres varied in strength. The weaker ones could only provide about 10,000 yellow springs water droplets, while the stronger ones could provide tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. This discovery made Zhuowen extremely happy. This was also the main reason why the Yellow Springs water droplets had broken through the 10 million mark. When the number of netherworld water droplets reached 10 million, the slaughtering netherworld finger changed again. Countless netherworld water droplets began to gather, forming a circular gate of reincarnation. When the gate of reincarnation was closed, it possessed an extremely powerful defensive power. Once it was opened, a terrifying finger of the Yellow Springs could be seen shooting out. Looking at the constantly rotating gate of reincarnation floating above Zhuan, a trace of confusion appeared in the eyes of the first mountain god. However, this confusion was quickly concealed by him. At the 10 million mark, the massacring finger of the netherworld has indeed undergone another transformation. Right now, the power of the massacring finger of the netherworld is probably above that of the Buddha-seeking demon transformation. Zhuan's eyes revealed a look of wild joy. Zhuan had a feeling that once the number of Yellow Springs water droplets reached 100 million, there might be a real transformation. However, 100 million was too far away. After all, he had already spent a long time collecting 10 million, let alone 100 million. Of course, if there were more of these black balls here, then his massacring finger of the netherworld could really break through the 100 million mark. Bang, bang, bang. Just as Zhuan wanted to absorb the essence of the black balls again, all the black balls at the bottom of the pool exploded into a bloody mist. Then the entire pool began to shake violently. In the depths of the pool, a huge beast seemed to be silently awakening. Rumble! Suddenly, the barrier at the bottom of the pool shattered. A claw that was hundreds of feet long and covered in black scales stretched out from the shattered barrier and grabbed at Zhuan. Zhuan's pupils shrank. He roared and immediately blocked the gate of reincarnation in front of him. However, he was surprised that such a claw suddenly appeared at the bottom of the pool. Bang! However, what happened next shocked Zhuan. The moment the black claw landed on the gate of reincarnation, the gate of reincarnation crumbled into pieces in less than a breath's time. What is this? My gate of reincarnation was smashed into pieces? Zhuan's pupils shrank to the size of needles. His heart was beating wildly, and his heart was filled with fear. The giant claw was too fast. Zhuan didn't even have time to react. Just as the giant claw was about to crush Zhuan, the first mountain god rushed over and punched out. Bang! The fist and the claw collided. Then the entire space seemed to have stopped. Then, an invisible ripple spread out. Countless whirlpools began to appear in the pool. Outside the pool, the entire cave began to shake violently. Black water pillars rose from the surface of the pool. The sharp stalactites above the cave rustled and fell, stabbing into the ground. Ji Chenyan's beautiful eyes were filled with fear. She didn't know what was going on at the bottom of the pool. Looking at the cave that was shaking more and more violently, she gritted her teeth and took a step forward, dashing towards the exit. No matter what happened at the bottom of the pool, she wouldn't die here with Zhuan. With a groan, the first mountain god's arm burst out a cloud of blood mist. Then, the first mountain god carried Zhuan with one hand and stepped on the water with his right foot. Like an arrow leaving the bow, he rushed upward. The first mountain god is injured? Zhuan couldn't believe it. In his opinion, the first mountain god's body was extremely strong. At the very least, he had a perfect complete holy body. His strength was comparable to a true immortal expert like Do Hua. But now, such an expert was actually injured by the claw just now. What was the origin of this strange giant claw? Mountain explosion. The first mountain god roared and grabbed with his right hand. Suddenly, the first mountain was caught in his hand and suddenly expanded. At the top of the first mountain, terrifying magma erupted as if it could destroy the world. The magma was so powerful that it drowned the entire black pool. Countless magma began to gather into a fire dragon that covered the sky. The fire dragon roared and swept out to meet the strange giant claw. Bang, bang, bang. There was a loud explosion and the aftermath of the collision spread out. Zhuan's face turned pale and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with horror. Let's go! The first mountain god's face was also pale. Without hesitation, he carried Zhuan and stepped into the void. his speed reached the terrifying level of teleportation. The surrounding space was distorted, and he and Zhuowen disappeared from the black pool. The instant the first mountain god and Zhuowen disappeared from the blackwater pool, the terrifying fire dragon formed from magma let out a mournful cry. It was violently clawed by the enormous claw that covered the sky, and instantly scattered into countless sparks. However, after the fire dragon disappeared, the giant claw didn't continue to chase after them. It was as if it was afraid of something outside the pool. Perhaps the giant claw couldn't survive in the space outside the black pool. In short, the terrifying giant claw lingered at the bottom of the black pool for a while before retreating into the depths of the black pool. At the same time, the cracked barrier of the black pool was restored. In the depths of the barrier, hundreds of black balls extended out. These black balls were swallowing the black blood in the surrounding black pool. Ji Chenyan's beautiful eyes stared blankly at the collapsed Gobi Desert. She muttered in a low voice, "What happened?" That tremor just now, as well as the aura coming from the black pool, was too terrifying. Could Zhuowen have died in there? However, just as Ji Chenyan thought that Zhuowen had died in the black pool, the space near the collapsed Gobi Desert suddenly distorted. Then, the first mountain god and Zhuowen slowly walked out of the distorted space. Both Zhuowen and the first mountain god were extremely pale. What was that thing? It was so terrifying. Zhuowen said with lingering fear. The first mountain god took a deep breath and said, "That thing should be related to the mysterious power in the depths of the heavenly armor star. Our injuries are not light. Let's heal ourselves first." As he said that, the first mountain god waved his sleeve and took out 2 elixirs. He passed one of them to Zhuowen. "This is the elixir of creation. It can heal all the injuries in your body in an instant without any side effects. I don't have much left on me. Take it quickly." The first mountain god said calmly. Zhuowen looked at the elixir of creation and swallowed it. Then he felt a strong warm current surging in his dantian. After it circulated around his body, he felt refreshed and all the injuries he had left behind were healed. "Young Master Zhuowen, are you all right?" Ji Chenyan came to Zhuowen and asked worriedly. Zhuowen waved his hand and said, "I'm fine. I still have some matters to attend to. I'll take my leave first." After his injuries were healed, Zhuowen cupped his fists at Ji Chenyan. Then, he turned into a ray of light and left the place. Ji Chenyan wanted to chase after him, but she realized that Zhuowen's speed was faster than teleportation. In the end, she had no choice but to give up. Moreover, Zhuowen left so quickly because he didn't want Ji Chenyan to catch up to him. Ji Chenyan knew this very well. Isn't that the direction the ancestor wanted to go? The ancestor said that it's a dangerous place. He warned me not to go there. Ji Chenyan's beautiful eyes flickered. After thinking about it, she didn't chase after him. Strange splashes of water appeared from time to time in the huge black lake. Taodai was lying quietly on the shore. Yuan Hongwen was sitting cross-legged on the roof of the central palace. He was silently meditating. Suddenly, Yuan Hongwen opened his eyes. His gaze fell on the distant horizon. He sensed an extremely familiar aura. Yuan Hongwen stood up abruptly. He stared at the horizon and smiled faintly. "Brother Zhua, I knew you would come here." As soon as Yuan Hongwen finished speaking, a ray of light shot over from the horizon. Its speed was extremely fast. It was originally tens of thousands of miles away, but in the blink of an eye, it was already in the sky not far away from Yuan Hongwen, revealing a tall and straight figure. Chapter 1823. Battle again. This is... Then stared fixedly at the lake of black water before him, and he was indescribably shocked in his heart. The black water in the lake had the same aura as the black water in the pool of black water in the cave. In other words, the entire lake of black water was constructed from the blood of saints. Even though it was the dregs of saint blood, it was sufficient to shock Zhuowen. The lake of black water was truly too large. The amount of saint blood required to construct such a large lake was something Zhuowen didn't even dare imagine. Zhuowen couldn't help but recall the few hundred black balls he encountered in the pool of black water. He knew that the number of black balls at the bottom of the lake was probably even greater than the pool of black water from before, and there would be many, many more. Brother Yuan, the Divine Master has already entered the lake of black water? Zhuan asked with a solemn gaze. The expression on Zhuowen's face didn't escape Yuan Hongwen's notice. However, he didn't think too much about it and nodded instead. The Divine Master, the 4 masters of the battlefield, and over a dozen heavenly immortal realm experts have all entered. Right? There's also the Master of the Divine Tomb and Senior Shiji. When he spoke up to hear, Yuan Hongwen glanced at Zhuowen and shook his head. This place is extraordinarily dangerous. Even the Divine Master instructed me not to vainly attempt to enter this place. Otherwise, my life would be in danger. I advise you to give up on the thought of entering this place. At the instant Zhuowen flashed over here, Yuan Hongwen knew that Zhuowen intended to enter the lake of black water, so he advised Zhuowen with kind words at this moment. Even though Zhuowen had domineeringly defeated him in the final path of life and death, Yuan Hongwen didn't hold a grudge because of this. As far as he was concerned, the law of the jungle was the way of the world. Zhuowen had relied on true ability to defeat him. Moreover, they'd fought to their heart's content in that battle, causing Yuan Hongwen to feel regretful that he hadn't met Zhuowen earlier. Zhuowen shook his head instead and said, I must enter this place. You can't stop me. Yuan Hongwen's eyes narrowed as a vast aura suddenly surged out explosively. Instantly, the surrounding atmosphere became much more stagnant and terrifying. It was like a volcano had erupted, and it was extremely heavy. Not necessarily. Yuan Hongwen's eyes blazed with fighting spirit. He stared at Zhuowen and said with a smile, Zhuowen, Hongwen's memories of our last battle are still fresh. If you want to enter the Black Lake today, you'll have to defeat me first. Zhuowen looked at Yuan Hongwen and asked in a deep voice, Are you really going to stop me? Yuan Hongwen chuckled, Why not? All right then, let's decide the outcome of this battle with one move. You and I will use our strongest moves. If I lose, I will retreat. Zhuowen took a step forward, and the aura in his body surged up like an upside-down waterfall. The surrounding air suddenly turned into countless cyclones, and these cyclones began to condense in the air, forming a huge vortex that could swallow the heavens and the earth. That's exactly what I was thinking. Yuan Hongwen let out a long laugh. He stepped on the air with his right foot and floated in midair. Soon after, his gaze became serious. Bang bang bang. Yuan Hongwen's entire body erupted with a terrifying blood mist, and a vast and terrifying aura suddenly erupted from his body. God-slaying blood eye. Yuan Hongwen's gaze became extremely serious. He bit the tip of his tongue and spat out another mouthful of blood essence. His face was slightly pale. The blood eye was his strongest celestial art. It was extremely powerful, but the price to use it was also very high. When the blood essence fell on the blood mist in front of him, it actually caused the blood mist to wriggle violently. All of a sudden, the squirming blood mist suddenly exploded, and countless lines of blood burst out from it. These blood threads spread out in all directions, forming numerous ferocious and terrifying blood eyes in the air above Yuan Hongwen. There were so many blood eyes that they almost covered the entire sky above the Black Lake. It was as if the whole world was being watched by these countless blood eyes. As soon as the blood eyes appeared, the entire Black Lake was set off by monstrous waves, mixed with the ferocious howls of some exotic beasts. Tao Tai, who was originally lying on the shore, stared at Zhuowen with an extremely unfriendly gaze. An aura that could even shake the world flowed out of Tao Ye's body. Yuan Hongwen stood under the countless blood eyes. He looked at Tao Tai and said in a deep voice, This is a battle between me and Chun. I hope Brother Tao Tai will not interfere. Tao Tai roared at Yuan Hongwen. Soon after, it glanced at Zhuowen. Soon after, that terrifying aura slowly dissipated. Tao Tai tilted its head and once again laid on the shore, no longer caring about the battle on this side. Zhuowen solemnly glanced at the Tao. This Tao Tai gave him a very strong feeling. This kind of giant beast contained the true bloodline of the Tao. Its strength could not be underestimated. Brother Zhuo, do you dare to fight me? Yuan Hongwen's eyes were filled with fighting intent. His voice was like thunder as he looked down at Juan. As Yuan Hongwen looked down, the countless blood eyes in the sky followed his gaze and fell on Juan. With so many blood eyes gathered on Zhuo Wen's body, even Zhuo Wen felt his scalp go numb. However, Yuan was not afraid. He leaped up, his long hair and robe fluttering. He pointed his right hand at the void and said, "Slaughtering finger of the underworld." Zhuo Wen pointed, and countless yellow springs water droplets flew out of his body. Yuan Hongwen frowned. He had experienced the slaughtering finger of the underworld during the Battle of the Gods. Its power was ordinary and could not be compared to his blood eyes. Could it be that this Zhuo Wen used this move to look down on him, Yuan Hongwen? The power of Zhuo Wen's move seems to have increased a lot, and it's still increasing. Suddenly, Yuan Hongwen's expression changed. He saw the yellow springs water droplets around Zhuo Wen increasing in number, becoming denser and denser. In an instant, the yellow springs water droplets broke through the million mark and showed no signs of stopping. 2 million, 3 million, all the way to 10 million. There were simply too many yellow springs droplets around Zhuo Wen, densely packed together. Even Yuan Hongwen had to pay attention to the aura emanating from the gathering of so many yellow springs droplets. Slaughtering finger of the underworld, gate of reincarnation. Zhuan formed a seal with his right hand. Immediately, the millions of underworld water droplets gathered together and formed a circular gate. This circular gate was very big, at least several thousand feet in size. It appeared behind Zhuan in the void and kept rotating. It was as if this gate really hid reincarnation. Yuan Hongwen let out a long laugh and took a step forward. The blood-red eyes that filled the sky blinked one after another, and strange and thick blood-red lines shot out, interweaving in the void. The blood lines moved at an extremely fast speed, spreading around Zhuo Wen's body in an instant. They kept intersecting, forming an irregular fence of blood lines. Furthermore, these bloody fences were extremely irregular, as if they had been randomly drawn in the void. The moment the blood lines intersected, Zhuo Wen felt an extremely terrifying sense of restraint around him. This feeling of restraint was very strong, and it froze Zhuo Wen's limbs in the air. He was unable to move at all. Yuan Hongwen walked over step by step. Under the illumination of the countless bloodlines, his eyes turned blood-red and frenzied. He pointed a finger at Zhuo Wen's forehead. Zhuan snorted and pointed with his right hand. The huge reincarnation gate behind him spun faster and faster and blocked in front of Zhuan. A mysterious power of reincarnation spread out. The surrounding densely packed irregular blood immortals were directly sent into reincarnation by the gate of reincarnation, disappearing without a trace. The moment Yuan Hongwen's finger landed on the gate of reincarnation, a clear and melodious ding was heard. Yuan Hongwen's expression changed at this moment. He only felt that the sky and earth were spinning. His mind kept replaying all his past experiences. This feeling kept repeating, as if he had fallen into a reincarnation that he could not extricate himself from. Blood eyes condense, heaven and earth collapse. Yuan Hongwen's eyes showed that he was struggling. Then he let out a low roar. Suddenly, the blood eyes that filled the sky burst into countless blood mist. The blood mist began to condense and eventually turned into a huge blood eye. This blood eye was so huge that as soon as it appeared, it stared at the reincarnation gate. A burst of nothingness came from the gate, and the surface of the reincarnation gate made continuous explosive sounds. Zhuan stared at this scene with narrowed eyes. He snorted and pointed with his right hand, saying, "Reincarnation gate, reincarnation. Massacre in the Yellow Springs." After that, the sound of machinery came from the gate. The gate began to open, and a pressure that had never been there before poured out from the gate. Rumble. Behind the gate of reincarnation, a finger that was tens of thousands of feet long stretched out and pointed at Yuan Hongwen. It was as if a giant was trying to crush an ant to death. Bang, bang, bang. The huge finger pointed at the blood eye. Then, countless blood mist burst out in midair. The blood mist gathered together and formed a blood rain that sprinkled around and formed the blood eye. Zhuowen's Yellow Springs Finger of Massacre had less than 1,000,000 Yellow Springs water droplets, so its power was not fully unleashed. Now, Nguyen had absorbed too much essence from the black pool. The number of Yellow Springs water droplets had skyrocketed and reached the 10 million mark. The Yellow Springs Finger of Massacre, which was originally not very powerful, had suddenly become the strongest immortal art he had. In addition, Zhuowen's cultivation had advanced to the late Earth immortal realm. Yuan Hongwen, who was difficult to deal with in the past, was not as big of a threat to Zhuowen as before. The Yellow Springs Finger of Massacre was too terrifying. When the finger pointed, the blood eye took a step back. When the finger pointed twice, the blood eye took 2 steps back. Yuan Hongwen retreated step by step. With every step he took, the blood mist on his body would involuntarily erupt. Yuan Hongwen's eyes were filled with horror. I can't lose. Yuan Hongwen's eyes were red. He was unwilling. He had already lost the battle of gods once. He would not allow himself to lose a second time. With a lot of unwillingness, Yuan Hongwen pointed with his right hand. An invisible ripple spread out and enveloped the blood eye. Instantly, the blood eye erupted with a terrifying power. Its power had reached another level. It stopped in one fell swoop. Then, countless blood immortals gushed out and completely covered the Yellow Springs Finger of Massacre. Dao intent? Unfortunately, the strength of your Dao insight is too weak. Let me show you what the real power of Dao intent is. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.